Chapter 39. Upon hearing this voice, Su Hong and the rest shuddered. They paused for a moment before turning around slowly. Second young master. Second young master is back. Second young master is not dead. The crowd cheered. Su Hong pursed his lips tightly. His heart was in turmoil. His body, which was already extremely weak, seemed to be suddenly flooded with an invisible force. He was energized. Unlike Su Hong and the rest, although Song-Chi was happy, he was more surprised and shocked. Song-Chi knew very well how difficult it was to kill the king of a country in the capital, and then fight his way out of the siege. One had to know that there were not only 2 or 3 Qi refinement warriors in the capital of the country of Yen. There was an entire cultivation sect. Who could escape from the siege of the imperial guards and Qi refinement warriors in the capital? Song-Chi knew that even if he advanced to level 10 perfected, it was impossible. Perhaps it was only possible when he became a foundation establishment cultivator. Of course, this was only a possibility. In Song-Chi's eyes, Su Zimo became even more mysterious and terrifying. Song-Chi turned and looked at Luo Tianwu with a trace of pity in his eyes. He thought to himself, I'm afraid this city lord has not realized what kind of opponent he is facing. At the sight of Su Zimo's return, even with Luo Tianwu's shrewdness, he lost his composure at this moment. He was dumbfounded and his eyes were filled with disbelief. The gray-robed Qi refinement warrior behind him was even more surprised. He frowned deeply. Preceptor, why is Su Zimo still alive? Didn't you say that he would definitely die? Luo Tianwu asked in a low voice. The gray-robed Qi refinement warrior shook his head and said, I'm not sure either. This lad must have good luck, and did not bump into any Qi refinement warriors. Otherwise, how could he have escaped from the capital? For some reason, Luo Tianwu felt a sense of trepidation when he looked at Su Zimo, who was on the city wall. Preceptor, if we are really defeated later, you must protect me well. At most, we can return to Zhonglang City and wait for a comeback. The gray-robed Qi refinement warrior said in a firm tone, Your Majesty, don't worry. If things are not going well, I will bring you in retreat first. Okay. Luo Tianwu's expression softened and he felt slightly at ease. On the city wall. Su family. Second young master? Hearing the shouts below, Chao Wenxing's heart trembled. Pointing at Su Zimo's back, he looked around and asked in a deep voice, When did this person come? None of the soldiers said a word. On one hand, they didn't want to respond. On the other hand, they really didn't pay attention. It was as if this person had appeared out of thin air. Chao Wenxing was used to being arrogant and bossy, so when he saw that the soldiers were silent, he couldn't help but curse, what a bunch of trash. You actually allowed outsiders to climb up the wall, what use are you? Right at this moment, Su Zimo slowly spun around and stared at Chao Wenxing with an expressionless face. He stared at Chao Wenxing until Chao Wenxing felt his scalp going numb. Suddenly, he asked, Are you the one who gave the order to kill these common people of Great Yen under the city wall? So what if I am? Chao Wenxing pulled out the big sword from his waist, calmed his mind and said loudly, nothing much. Su Zimo smiled and his eyes turned cold. He said, You are the governor of a city, guarding the border of Great Yen Kingdom. Not only did you fail to protect your own people, you even gave the order to kill them. Speaking up to this point, Su Zimo paused for a moment, and a wisp of heart-palpitating cold-killing intent suddenly shot out from his eyes. He shouted loudly, What's the use of having you? Whoosh! Su Zimo jumped. While his body was still in the air, everyone heard a clang. The cold moon saber was unsheathed. Su Zimo held the cold moon saber in his hand and descended from the air. His arm drew a huge arc in the air and chopped down on Chao Wenxing's head with a force that could split Mount Hua. This strike was full of flaws. However, this slash was simply too ferocious. It was so fierce that it made Chao Wenxing's mind tremble. He couldn't fight back and subconsciously raised the big sword in his hand to block above his head. The glaring light of the saber made many soldiers squint their eyes. Crack! The big sword broke. Puff! Blood flashed. Su Zimo put the saber back into the scabbard. Chao Wenxing's eyes were wide open. A weird vertical red line appeared between his eyes, dividing his face into 2 halves. The next moment, Chao Wenxing's body was split into 2, and he fell to the ground heavily. Blood gushed out and instantly dyed the stone bricks below the city wall red. Many soldiers were shocked. One strike. Chao Wenxing, who was in the innate realm, was split into two by the man in front of them. Su Zimo came to Wei Mingcheng and helped him up. He asked, "Can you still fight?" "Yes." Wei Mingcheng ignored the pain in his chest and gritted his teeth. He said loudly, "Don't worry, young master. I will gather the troops and go out of the city to help the black armored cavalry kill the enemy." "No need." Su Zimo waved his hand and shook his head. He said, "Don't let there be internal strife in Jianan City because of this and implicate the people in the city." Wei Mingcheng hurriedly said, "Young master, what are you talking about? It is our honor to fight side by side with the black armored cavalry. Who would not be willing? We are willing to fight side by side with the black armored cavalry and kill the enemy." The soldiers on the city wall shouted loudly. It was not until now that Su Zimo deeply understood the prestige of the black armored cavalry and the importance of his father in the hearts of these soldiers. If not, his father would not have been so outstanding and caused trouble. Su Zimo said in a low voice, "Open the city gate first and let the people of the Yan dynasty in. Calm them down. If anyone wants to kill the enemy, then go out of the city and fight." Wei Mingcheng hurriedly agreed. He looked at the soldiers around him and waved his hand. He shouted, "Let's go down and open the city gate first." After a pause, Wei Mingcheng looked back at Su Zimo and said, "Once the city gate is opened, the people will swarm in. Young master, you will not be able to squeeze out for the time being. Please wait for a moment." "No need." Su Zimo smiled. He turned and walked to the edge of the city wall and jumped. There was an uproar on the city wall. Jianan City was a city at the border of the country of Yan. Its city wall was sturdy and much higher than other cities. It was a full 100 feet tall. Even if a rock fell, it would be smashed into pieces, let alone a person of flesh and blood. Wei Mingcheng and the rest hurried forward and looked down the city wall. At the same time, the two armies on the battlefield also saw this scene. Many soldiers opened their mouths instinctively and their eyeballs almost fell out. Su Zimo fell at a very fast speed. Bang! There was a deafening sound. Many of the soldiers could clearly feel the ground trembling. Su Hong and the rest felt their hearts tighten. They could not help but break out in cold sweat for Su Zimo. Of course, they knew that Su Zimo was neither a fool nor a lunatic. Since he made such a move, he would definitely be fine. However, such a move had a strong impact on everyone present. Not to mention the postnatal and Khanate experts, even the two Qi refinement warriors from both camps were so frightened that they trembled all over. The muscles on Luo Tianwu's face twitched obviously. His face was pale and he pretended to be calm. The place where Su Zimo fell stirred up a cloud of sand and dust. Not long after, under countless gazes, a figure was faintly discernible amidst the billowing dust. He walked towards them with firm steps and the outline gradually became clearer. Chapter 40. As Su Zimo approached, the sky suddenly darkened. The weather had changed. There was no warning at all. A patch of dark clouds as dark as ink swept over, covering the sky and the sun. It loomed over Luo Tianwu and the 50,000 soldiers behind him, making them feel suffocated and suffocated. The dark clouds changed unpredictably, rolling and surging. In the sky, ferocious demonic beasts appeared. They were lifelike, with their bloody mouths wide open and their faces ferocious. Rumble! There was a shocking sound in the sky. It sounded like thunder, but also like the roaring of demonic beasts. Luo Tianwu, do you still remember what I said to you before I left Songlang City? Su Zimo came to the front of the two armies and looked at Luo Tianwu, who was riding on a tall horse in the distance. He asked slowly. Luo Tianwu's expression did not change. Thousands of thoughts flashed across his mind. He suddenly smiled and said, "Congratulations to second young Master Su for taking revenge. Lord Wooding can rest in peace with such a son. As the city lord, I am also proud to have such a person in Pingyang town. I will return to Songlang City now and hold a banquet to celebrate second young Master Su. I hope that the two young masters of the Su family will come along." Luo Tianwu had a premonition that the possibility of taking down Jianan City was very slim. Hence, he made a prompt decision to retreat to Songlang City. The king of Yan was dead and the army was leaderless. This was a rare opportunity. However, Luo Tianwu still intended to give up. This was the decision of an ambitious and ruthless person in troubled times. Without this courage, Luo Tianwu would not have reached where he was today. Nurturing a tiger will only invite calamity. All my efforts have been in vain. If I had known this would happen, I would have killed these two brats before they grew up. Luo Tianwu cursed in his heart, but the smile on his face did not diminish. In Luo Tianwu's opinion, as long as he showed weakness and retreated to Conglang City, Su Hong would definitely not pursue him. In fact, as Luo Tianwu expected, Su Hong came this time to protect the people of the country of Yan and guard the borders of the country of Yan. As long as he was willing to retreat, Su Hong would not lead the black armored cavalry to pursue him. Once they engaged in a battle, the black armored cavalry would inevitably suffer losses. Su Hong would try his best to avoid such a situation. However, Luo Tianwu still miscalculated. That was because he was not facing Su Hong but Su Zimo. Su Zimo raised his sword-like eyebrows and asked, "What? You want to escape?" Luo Tianwu pretended not to know and asked with a smile, "Second young master Su, what do you mean? Before I left Conglang City, I told you that I don't like to be used by others and told you to behave yourself. Unfortunately, City Lord Luo didn't seem to listen to me." Su Zimo's eyes contained a trace of mockery as he stared at Luo Tianwu and said coldly, "You want to run now? Do you think you can escape?" Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Su Zimo stomped his feet on the ground and suddenly charged forward. His legs crossed, and a string of afterimages appeared. In almost the blink of an eye, he charged to the front of the Conglang City's army formation. In front of Luo Tianwu stood a group of soldiers. However, Su Zimo simply charged forward and created a bloody path. No one could stop him at all. Luo Tianwu's expression changed. He subconsciously retreated and shouted, "State Preceptor, save me! Quick!" The gray-robed Qi refinement warrior hurriedly took out his flying sword and shouted softly. There was a flash of light on the flying sword. It was actually an inferior-grade spirit weapon. Swoosh! The flying sword was extremely fast. It turned into a stream of light and went straight for Su Zimo's head. Su Zimo had a mocking expression on his face. He maintained the same speed as he ran forward. Just as the flying sword was about to pierce his glabella, he suddenly lowered his head and dodged the flying sword by a hair's breadth. He continued to run forward. The gray-robed Qi refinement warrior's pupils suddenly constricted. He did not expect that his flying sword would miss. More than that, he did not expect Su Zimo to be so fast. The gray-robed Qi refinement warrior hurriedly controlled the flying sword and wanted to turn the sword around to stab Su Zimo. However, at this moment, Su Zimo leaped and had already arrived in front of the gray-robed Qi refinement warrior. He said lightly, "You are too weak." Crash! Su Zimo flipped his palm and landed it on the gray-robed Qi refinement warrior's head. The gray-robed Qi refinement warrior fell off the horse and died without making a sound. Su Zimo's figure landed. He tapped the tip of his foot on the fierce horse that the gray-robed Qi refinement warrior was riding. Once again he made use of the momentum and leaped into the air, pouncing towards Luo Tianwu, who was not far away. Luo Tianwu was completely scared out of his wits. He really did not expect that the Qi refinement warrior that he relied on the most and thought highly of would actually be defeated by Su Zimo in one move. It was too fast. Luo Tianwu did not even have the chance to escape. At this critical juncture of life and death, Luo Tianwu forcefully suppressed the fear in his heart. With a loud roar, he drew out the long saber at his waist and used all his strength to slash towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo did not dodge. This was because there was no need for that. Su Zimo reached out his palm and directly grabbed the long saber that was slashing towards him. His gaze was cold and menacing. With a loud bang, Su Zimo used his bare hands to forcefully break the long saber into two. In an instant, Luo Tianwu was completely disheartened. Su Zimo grabbed Luo Tianwu's neck and said loudly, "If I let you escape back to Conglang City, who will be responsible for the deaths of the innocent people? It is hard to say who is right and who is wrong in the war between the two countries. However, you sacrificed the lives of the innocent people to fulfill your ambitions. I, Su Zimo, will not tolerate you." Snap! Su Zimo exerted strength in his palm and crushed Luo Tianwu's throat. He casually threw the corpse aside and looked around. He raised his voice and said, Luo Tianwu is already dead. Why are all of you still not retreating? There were close to 50,000 soldiers and horses in Songlang City. However, they were intimidated by one person's aura and did not dare to move forward. Su Hong and the rest, as well as the 5,000 black armored cavalry, stood not far away and did not move at all. It was not that they did not want to support Su Zimo. However, the entire process simply happened too quickly. Everyone present did not expect that Su Zimo would strike. Even more so, they did not expect that Su Zimo's strike would be so swift and fierce. He killed Luo Tianwu in an instant with the force of a thunderbolt. Song Qi's flying sword had just been drawn. He did not even have the time to attack. In the battle just now, he had exchanged blows with the gray-robed Qi refinement warrior several times. Although they were both at level 8 Qi condensation, the other party's ability was slightly higher than his. However, in front of Su Zimo, the gray-robed Qi refinement warrior was already a corpse in just one move. The wolf guard of Songlang City, Chao Gang, was the first to react. He took a deep breath, cupped his fists and said, Young Master Su, thank you for showing mercy. Let's go back to the city. Chao Gang carried Luo Tianwu's corpse. His expression was gloomy and his heart was filled with emotions. He secretly sighed. The city lord is so scheming. However, it is a pity that fate is playing tricks on people. If not for Su Zimo, the outcome of today's battle would be completely different. Chao Gang recalled that a year and a half ago, the young man who refused to bow down to perfected Songlang. The young man who was demoted to a pariah and had almost lost everything. Who would have thought that it was the appearance of this young man who changed everything? Before leaving, Chao Gang could not help but turn back to look at the figure standing proudly. In a trance, this figure gradually merged with the young man from a year and a half ago. There was no distinction between them. Chao Gang suddenly thought of a sentence. It was a sentence that Su Zimo said to perfected Songlang. If you don't kill me, you will definitely regret it in the future. Chao Gang once thought that Su Zimo said this sentence that day just to save his life. It was only until now that Chao Gang realized that Su Zimo said this sentence not just to save his life. That was more like a letter of challenge and oath. Chapter 41. When Wei Mingqing led the guards out of the city, he realized that the 50,000-strong army of Songlang City had already retreated and gradually disappeared into the horizon. Wei Mingqing came to Su Hong and got down from his horse. He knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. Thank you for coming to my aid, General. I am Wei Mingqing, the Deputy General of Jianan City. Su Hong got down from his horse and helped Wei Mingqing up. I am just a commoner. I don't deserve such respect from General. May I know what is your relationship with Duke Whiting? Although Wei Mingqing had already guessed it, he still asked. Su Mu is my father. Wei Mingqing nodded. If not, no one in the world could command the black armored cavalry and make this iron-blooded army follow him willingly. Elder brother, this is Zhao Qian's head. Take it as a sacrifice to father and mother. They can rest in peace. Su Zimo walked over and passed the head at his waist to Su Hong. Su Hong took the King of Yan's head and looked at Su Zimo. For a moment he had mixed feelings. 16 years of forbearance and scheming. He did not expect that in the end, the Su family's blood feud would still fall on his younger brother's shoulders. Although Su Zimo did not mention a word about the battle at the capital right from the start. But looking at the fatigue in Su Zimo's eyes and the bloodstains on his body, Su Hong could guess that he must have gone through a fierce battle in the capital and had a narrow escape. Is the king really dead? Wei Mingqing looked at the King of Yan's head and murmured softly. There was a flash of brilliance in his eyes. He looked at Su Hong and said in a low voice, General Su, since the King of Yan is dead, we are willing to assist you in claiming the throne in Jianan City and return to the capital to clear Duke Whiting's name. Although the King of Yan had suppressed the tragedy 16 years ago, many of the soldiers did not believe that Su Mu would plot a rebellion. Given Su Mu's influence and status at that time, if he wanted to rebel and claim the throne, there were too many opportunities. When Uncle Zhang and the rest heard this, their hearts skipped a beat. If he wanted to proclaim himself a king, this was the best time. The King of Yan was dead and the country of Yan was in chaos. Moreover, Su Hong had made use of this battle to build up his reputation in Jianan City. After claiming the title of king, Su Hong would reveal his identity. Given Lord Wooding's influence back then, there would definitely be people in the 16 cities of the country of Yen who would sincerely submit to him. It was not impossible for him to unify the country of Yen. At the thought of this, Uncle Zheng said in a low voice, "Eldest young master, this is a rare opportunity." Lu Yu and the rest also looked at Su Hong expectantly, waiting for his reply. Su Zimo did not express his opinion. No matter what decision his elder brother made, he would support him unconditionally. After a short moment of silence, Su Hong smiled and shook his head. "Thank you for your kindness. It's just that I, Su Hong, don't have that ambition. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone." Uncle Zheng and the rest felt their vision darken. General Su Wei Mingcheng wanted to persuade him again but was interrupted by Su Hong. Su Hong said, "When the war breaks out, the only ones who will suffer are the innocent citizens of the country of Yen. By then, I don't know how many people will lose their homes and families. Just like what Zimo said, if I sacrifice the innocent citizens to satisfy my ambition, what's the difference between me and Luo Tianwu?" After a pause, Su Hong cupped his fists at Wei Mingqing and said, "General Wei, I have to return to Pingyang town to pay respects to my parents. We'll part ways here." With that, Su Hong got on his horse and led the 5,000 black armored cavalry back to Pingyang town. Wei Mingcheng and the soldiers stared at Su Hong's back view for a long time. Pingyang town, Su family's backyard. Su Hong, Su Zimo and Su Xiaoning knelt in front of a grave. Not far in front of them was the head of the king of Yen. Su Xiaoning was already sobbing. Su Hong's clothes were also covered in tears. All these years, Su Zimo had never seen his elder brother cry. Even when he failed to assassinate the king of Yen, Su Hong was only dispirited. He did not shed a single tear. Now that he had taken revenge, the hatred and resentment that had accumulated in Su Hong's heart for the past 16 years were released instantly. He could not control himself. Su Zimo did not shed a single tear. After kneeling for a while, he got up quietly and left the Su family's residence, returning to the cultivation field immediately. After entering, a look of disappointment flashed past Su Zimo's eyes. The cultivation field was empty. Daiyu was not around. Su Zimo stood at the same spot for a long time. He took a deep breath and seemed to have made a decision. He turned back and came to the backyard of the Su family's residence. He gave Songqi a look and turned to walk outside. Songqi noticed and chased after him hurriedly. "Second young master, what instructions do you have for me?" Songqi asked softly. Su Zimo was silent for a while. He took out a golden token from his chest and handed it over, saying, "This is the Sky Treasure Gold Token." Songqi had a shock. To him, the Sky Treasure Gold Token was too far away. Many Qi refinement warriors might not even be able to obtain a Sky Treasure Bronze Token in their lifetime, let alone a Sky Treasure Gold Token that was 2 grades higher. "Second young master, what do you mean?" Songqi asked hurriedly. Su Zimo said in a low voice, "After my elder brother and the rest have finished paying their respects, bring everyone from the Su family to Conglang City and hide in the Sky Treasure Pavilion for a while. Do not come out no matter what. As for the 5,000 black armored cavalry, let them disperse first and not gather together." Songqi had never seen Su Zimo's expression so grave and his tone so low. Songqi felt uneasy and asked again, "Second young master, did something happen? Could it be that the Su family has some powerful enemies?" "In the capital, I killed a few Qi refinement warriors and offended a sect. It won't be long before this sect finds their way here." Su Zimo did not choose to hide the truth. The biggest reason why he could escape from the capital was that there were no Foundation establishment cultivators from the Joyful clan in the capital. The Joyful clan had suffered such a huge loss. How could they take it lying down? Most likely, there were already Foundation establishment cultivators rushing to Pingyang town and they were on the way now. Songqi also realized how terrifying this matter was. Once a mortal offended a cultivation sect, death would be the best outcome. In serious cases, the entire family would be implicated. "Second young master, where are you going? Wouldn't it be better for you to go to the Sky Treasure Pavilion with us and hide for a while?" Songqi asked again. Su Zimo remained silent. Songqi's heart sank. He suddenly thought of a possibility and exclaimed, "You don't tell me you're going to stop the Foundation establishment cultivators from the cultivation sect?" Su Zimo said softly, if I don't die, that cultivation sect will not give up. The Su family cannot hide in the Sky Treasure Pavilion forever. Once the Su family members show themselves, they will definitely be hunted down and no one will be able to escape. Moreover, it has been 7 days since the king of Yin died. Given the speed of the Foundation establishment cultivators, they will most likely reach here soon. If no one stops them, they will definitely catch up with the Su family before they reach the Sky Treasure Pavilion in Songlang City. But second young master, Brother Song, don't pull a long face. I might not die. I might even annihilate that sect. Su Zimo smiled and pretended to be relaxed. Song Qi sighed in his heart and could not continue speaking. Song Qi was very clear that Su Zimo's decision was correct. However, he was using his own life to protect the lives of the Su family members. Stopping the Foundation establishment cultivators meant certain death. Su Zimo had no hope of survival at all. Su Zimo took out a storage bag from his chest. This was snatched from the one-armed Qi refinement warrior. He stuffed it into Song Qi's hands and patted his shoulders, saying in a low voice, the Su family, I'll leave it to you. With that, Su Zimo turned and left. Snow started to fall from the sky. This was the first snow of early winter. Chapter 42. In the wind and snow, Su Zimo sprinted in the direction of Songlang mountain range. He walked faster and faster. His eyes were clear and determined. Su Zimo did not close his eyes for the past half a month. In addition to the fierce battle in the capital, Su Zimo was physically and mentally exhausted. Even though he had the essence of the scarlet flame fruit in his body, the mental fatigue was hard to dispel. The next battle would be the true test for him. A test of life and death. If Su Zimo was an ordinary Qi refinement warrior, he would definitely die. However, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. He had a chance of winning. Dai Yu's words kept echoing in Su Zimo's mind. Demonic cultivators can easily kill opponents of a higher level. Although your current ability is far inferior to that of a Foundation establishment cultivator, if you can get close to him, you will still have a chance to kill him on the spot. Close combat ability was Su Zimo's greatest reliance. However, the most difficult thing was that the Joyful Clan cultivators had already experienced his close combat ability. They would take precautions in advance and would definitely not give him too many chances. And Su Zimo knew nothing about the means of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Was it just controlling spirit weapons? He was afraid that it was not that simple. Su Zimo sprinted at full speed and arrived at Songlang mountain range in no time. Cultivators were different from ordinary people when they traveled. They flew in the air. If they wanted to reach Pingyang town at the fastest speed and the shortest distance, they would definitely pass by the sky above Songlang mountain range. Su Zimo wanted to wait here and kill the Joyful Clan cultivators. Back at Songlang mountain range, Su Zimo felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. This was his main battlefield. After finding a towering ancient tree, Su Zimo used both his hands and feet to climb up quickly. He was even more agile than an ape. At a high point, he could detect suspicious movements immediately and take the initiative. In this battle, Su Zimo had to consider every detail carefully. Only then could he possibly reverse the situation and fight for a chance of survival. Su Zimo sat on the ancient tree with the cold moon saber in front of his knees. He held the sanguine crystal bow in his hand and closed his eyes. This was his last chance to rest. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. They fluttered about, covering the sky and the earth. The Songlang mountain range seemed to be covered with a layer of pure white gauze. It was crystal clear and beautiful. The sanguine crystal bow and the cold moon saber were covered in snowflakes. Their original appearances could no longer be seen. As Su Zimo rested, he circulated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness breathing and expiration method. His body was boiling and white steam was rising from the top of his head. Although Su Zimo's body was hot, his heart was getting colder and colder. His entire being emitted a piercingly cold murderous intent that permeated every corner of the Songlang mountain range. Suddenly, Su Zimo opened his eyes and looked into the distance. In the distant forest, a flock of birds seemed to have been frightened by something. They flapped their wings and soared into the sky, emitting hurried cries. Here it comes. At this point in time, only 2 hours had passed since Su Zimo arrived at the Zhonglang mountain range. Su Zimo's figure moved. He slid down from the ancient tree and landed quietly on the snowy ground. He took out the remaining 5 sharp arrows in the quiver, placed all of them on the bowstring and headed in that direction stealthily. The spirit boat was the most common flying spirit weapon in the cultivation world. Its advantage was that it was stable and fast. Moreover, it could carry many people. Just a while ago, a spirit boat from the Joyful clan entered the sky above the Zhonglang mountain range and traveled at high speed. There were about 100 people on the spirit boat. Most of them were level 8, level 9 or even perfected chi refinement warriors. The 5 people in the lead were the elders of the Joyful clan. 4 of them were at the early stage foundation establishment realm while the last one was at the mid-stage foundation establishment realm. In the Joyful clan, one could only be conferred the title of an elder after becoming a foundation establishment realm cultivator. This time, in order to hunt down Su Zimo, the Joyful clan had mobilized almost half of their forces. It was evident that the Joyful clan attached great importance to this matter. If the opponent was a cultivator, even if it was a chi refinement warrior, the Joyful clan would also have some reservations. They were afraid that they would provoke the power of the sect behind the cultivator. After all, the Joyful clan was only a small sect. Otherwise, it would not have attached itself to the country of Yin, which was one of the vassal states. However, Su Zimo was only a mortal. Did he think that he could provoke the cultivation sects just because he had a strong physical body and knew some martial arts? If Su Zimo did not die and if the Su family did not perish, the Joyful clan would become the laughingstock of the cultivation world in the future. Elder Chan, this Su Zimo's close combat skills are a little frightening. We don't dare to go forward at all. Elder, you have to be careful too. Don't let him get close to you. A chi refinement warrior by the side smiled in a flattering manner, wanting to remind him out of goodwill. Unexpectedly, Elder Chen's face darkened. He snorted softly and said, "How can a chi refinement warrior be the same as a foundation establishment cultivator? Do we need you to remind us?" Another elder sneered and said, "Not to mention that Su Zimo is in front of us, there is no way he can get close to us. Even if he gets close to us, he can't hurt us." Yes. Elder Gao is right. That chi refinement warrior looked embarrassed and smiled apologetically. This chi refinement warrior seemed to have thought of something. He looked hesitant and wanted to say something but stopped. "Just say what you want to say," the only mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator said lightly. This chi refinement warrior looked horrified and seemed to have a lingering fear. He said, "Elder Chen, this lad has a blood-colored big bow. The arrow that he shoots is very powerful and fast. Although the accuracy is a little bad, if the distance is close, the lethality is also very terrifying. Elders, you have to be careful." Haha. Elder Chen smiled. A trace of mockery flashed past his eyes, but he did not say anything. Elder Gao, on the other hand, laughed loudly and said, "You are a bunch of good-for-nothings. As chi refinement warriors, you are actually so frightened by a mortal's bow and arrow. You have really embarrassed the sect. When we meet this lad later, let him shoot an arrow. See how I destroy this lad's sharp arrow." Just as Elder Gao's laughter died down, a figure suddenly flashed out from behind an ancient tree not far in front of the spirit boat. He was holding a blood-colored big bow. The bow was like a full moon and the arrow was already on the string. Oh, there is a murderous aura. Elder Chen was originally sitting cross-legged on the spirit boat. Suddenly he was shocked. He slapped his storage bag and a talisman fell into his palm. He crushed it directly and shouted at the same time, "Be careful!" Swoosh! The sound of sharp arrows piercing through the air could be heard. 5 sharp arrows flashed with cold light. Almost instantly, they had already shot in front of the many cultivators from Joyful clan. The 5 Joyful clan elders were the first to bear the brunt. Elder Chen's reaction was extremely fast. Almost at the same time when Elder Chen crushed the talisman, he also crushed a talisman. A layer of shining light shield appeared on his body. The other 2 elders directly took out their flying swords and placed them in front of them. Elder Gao was the only one who was laughing wantonly. His reaction was slightly slower and there was a trace of astonishment in his eyes. The cold light grew bigger and bigger in Elder Gao's eyes. Poof! A jet of black light entered his chest directly and came out through his body. Blood splattered on Elder Gao's body. Although this arrow did not hit his heart, the terrifying power that the sharp arrow carried instantly tore open the wound and destroyed all the vitality in Elder Gao's body. Elder Gao stood motionless on the spirit boat. Blood was gushing out from his chest and mouth. There was some confusion and regret in his eyes. He murmured softly, "What a fast arrow! A Foundation establishment cultivator, dead." Chapter 43. After surviving in Songlang Mountain Range for a year, Su Zimo had a deeper understanding of combat. There were many factors that could affect a battle. Strength was the foundation, but it was not the only factor. The weather, mentality, environment, preparation, and various details would change the situation and even affect the final outcome. This time round, Su Zimo took advantage of the weather and his prior preparations. One party was unprepared while the other party had been waiting for a long time. In addition, the heavy snow blocked one's vision and visibility was very low. By the time the joyful clan cultivators reacted, the 5 sharp arrows were already in front of them. Clang! 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 Out of the 5 arrows, 2 of them hit the light shield of the 2 joyful clan elders. The light shield vibrated violently, but the sharp arrows were deflected. The other 2 arrows were blocked by the flying swords of the 2 joyful clan elders. However, the arrow that hit Elder Gao had caused destructive damage to many joyful clan cultivators. Elder Gao, who was at the early stage Foundation establishment realm, was caught off guard and killed by the arrow. The power of this arrow did not seem to have diminished as it continued to travel to the back. The spirit boat was not big. More than 100 Qi refinement warriors were divided into 5 rows and stood behind the 5 elders. Behind Elder Gao stood 20 Qi refinement warriors. Even the Foundation establishment cultivators did not react in time, let alone the Qi refinement warriors behind them. The 20 Qi refinement warriors did not even see this sharp arrow. They felt a pain in their chest and the vitality in their body drained rapidly. Their eyes dimmed and they fell from the spirit boat. The power of this arrow was too strong. It pierced through the flesh and blood of 21 cultivators and still had energy left. It hit a towering ancient tree and the tail of the arrow was shaking violently. A total of 21 cultivators, including 1 Foundation establishment cultivator, were killed by Su Zimo with 1 arrow. It's him. It's Su Zimo. The few Qi refinement warriors on the spirit boat recognized Su Zimo and shouted, "Withdraw the spirit boat and kill this person." Elder Qin was furious and shouted sternly. Although this arrow did not injure the 4 Foundation establishment cultivators, it still caused them to feel a lingering fear. If they had reacted a little slower, they would have been dead by now. Swoosh! Swoosh! Whoosh! Many Qi refinement warriors on the spirit boat rose into the air. They took out their spirit weapons and attacked Su Zimo at the same time. In an instant, spiritual light flashed in the air, dazzling and dazzling. Sword Qi was like frost, passing through the wind and snow, covering the sky and covering the earth. Of course, Su Zimo didn't think that he had the strength to fight against an entire sect. Just now, he was lucky that his arrow could kill a Foundation establishment cultivator. After shooting 5 arrows, Su Zimo did not hesitate and immediately fled into the distance. Quick! The 2 joyful clan elders struck at the same time. A beam of spiritual light flickered on their flying swords as they pierced towards the back of Su Zimo's head. They arrived abruptly at an extremely fast speed. Before the sword arrived, Su Zimo felt his scalp tingle as a bone-piercing chill invaded his body. We can't fight recklessly. Su Zimo realized that even if he unleashed all his strength to block the flying swords of the Foundation establishment cultivators, he would most likely be seriously injured. Elder Chun took out a long banner from his storage bag. It fluttered in the wind. On the strip-shaped banner, there was a drawing of a naked lady. She was charming and seductive. All of a sudden, there was a flash of spiritual light on the long banner. That seductive lady suddenly opened her eyes. She blinked her big, watery eyes and looked at Su Zimo. Her naked body actually moved on the banner, posing in a posture that made one's blood boil. It was extremely seductive and captivating. Su Zimo only took a glance from the corner of his eyes. He felt that his mouth and tongue were dry and a ball of evil fire was rising in his lower abdomen. Strange. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He didn't dare to look anymore. He continued to run forward, twisting and turning in the forest, avoiding the many spirit weapons that were piercing towards him from behind. It was only at this moment that Su Zimo truly experienced the changes that his spirit perception brought to him. To be fair, if he were to fight against a cultivator one-on-one, the help of his spirit perception would not be obvious. However, against such a dense attack, the sky was filled with blinding spiritual lights and the sounds of swords and sabers that pierced through metal and cracked stone. Be it vision or hearing, everything was greatly affected. Even if Su Zimo saw a flying sword piercing towards him and wanted to dodge, it would already be too late. However, spirit perception was different. He could sense danger and avoid it without seeing it or hearing it. Su Zimo did not need to see or hear. He relied entirely on an indescribable sense to escape through the dense flashes of swords and sabers. Just now, Su Zimo shot out 5 arrows at once because he realized that the other party might not give him another chance to shoot once they exchanged blows. True enough. Under the barrage of attacks, Su Zimo would be killed on the spot if he paused for even a moment, let alone shooting arrows. Whoosh! 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 A soul-stirring sound rang out. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he forcefully stopped himself in his tracks. Pulling out his cold moon saber, he turned around and swung it to deflect the dozens of flying swords piercing towards him. Borrowing the force from the flying swords, his body tilted and fell to the other side, rolling on the ground. Boom! There was a loud bang. Su Zimo glanced sideways. 3 inches in front of him, a ring-shaped spirit weapon had smashed a huge hole in the ground. Just now, if he had taken half a step forward, his entire body would have been blown apart by this ring-shaped spirit weapon. Su Zimo looked carefully and saw that there were 2 spirit patterns flashing on this ring-shaped spirit weapon. Middle-grade spirit weapon. Seeing that Su Zimo had dodged his long-awaited killing blow, Elder Qian snorted coldly and controlled the ring-shaped spirit weapon to charge towards Su Zimo once more. Su Zimo crawled on the ground, using both his hands and feet to move close to the ground. His body was as weak and agile as a python. As he slid across the snowy ground, he left a curved trail behind him. Seeing that the flying swords were about to hit Su Zimo, he twisted his body strangely and dodged them by a hair's breadth. However, his speed did not seem to decrease at all. Many cultivators were even more frustrated and their attacks became even fiercer. Boom! 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 The spirit weapon missed and smashed onto the ground continuously, brushing past Su Zimo several times. The sand and stones that were stirred up hit Su Zimo's body, causing him to feel a faint pain. Su Zimo pursed his lips tightly. With a calm expression, he gritted his teeth and persevered. The cultivators from Joyful Clan had never seen such a movement technique. At times he was like a galloping horse, at other times he was like a monkey leaping across the ground, and at other times he was like a python plucking grass. Su Zimo's physical fitness had completely exceeded the knowledge of many cultivators. Even the spirit beasts that were known for their strong physical bodies could not achieve this. Lad, you will definitely die today. Let's see where you can escape to. Elder Chun hollered angrily. He waved the long banner in his hands. The coquettish lady on the banner opened her mouth and gently breathed out a puff of pink fog. Who would have expected that the wind and snow would be so strong now? Just as the pink fog gushed out, it was blown away by the wind and snow. Instead, it drifted in the direction of the Joyful Clan Chi Refinement Warriors. Many Chi Refinement Warriors were caught off guard and were contaminated by the pink fog. Instantly, their faces flushed red and they panted heavily. They lost their balance in midair and were on the verge of falling. Everyone hurriedly took out an elixir from their storage bags and swallowed it. It was only then that they felt slightly better. Although Elder Chen's spirit banner was only an inferior grade spirit weapon, it could affect the opponent's mind. Just now, the pink fog that it spewed out was his trump card. If a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator was not careful, he might suffer a huge setback. Elder Chun did not expect that his trump card did not injure Su Zimo. Instead, it caused a huge mess on his side. At the sight of this, Elder Qian hollered angrily, "Stupid! Put away your lousy banner and chase after this lad obediently. He won't be able to hold on for long." Elder Qian's expression was ugly. He blamed everything on Su Zimo, and the murderous intent in his heart grew stronger. Chapter 44. The joyful clan was in a mess. Su Zimo was invigorated. He leaped up, unleashed the divine steed fleeting movement technique, and dashed diagonally ahead. Elder Qian and the rest quickly chased after him. Not far ahead there was a steep mountain peak. The eyes of Elder Qian and the rest lit up. Su Zimo did not know how to fly. If he wanted to cross this mountain peak, he would definitely have to take a detour. In that case, they could take the opportunity to surround Su Zimo. They might even capture him alive. However, what puzzled the joyful clan was that Su Zimo did not reduce his speed. Neither did he change his direction. He dashed straight toward the mountain peak ahead. Could it be that this person is courting death and wants to kill himself? A Qi refinement warrior muttered. As soon as he finished his words, Elder Chun let out a soft cry of surprise. Su Zimo's figure actually disappeared mysteriously when he reached the mountain peak. The joyful clan rushed forward to take a look. It turned out that there was a cave at the foot of the mountain. It was dark and deep inside. It was as if a ferocious demonic beast was lying on the ground with its bloody mouth wide open, waiting for the joyful clan to walk in by themselves. Su Zimo actually escaped into this cave. The cave was dark and gloomy. The space was narrow and small. Be it Qi refinement warriors or foundation establishment cultivators, they could not fly in the air. This meant that the joyful clan no longer had an advantage and Su Zimo had become extremely dangerous. He might even kill them. Suddenly, the joyful clan's hearts were shrouded in a layer of haze. It should have been an absolutely crushing situation. However, for some unknown reason, everyone felt that they were being led by the nose. Should they chase? If they did, how should they chase? Two questions flashed across everyone's mind. If this cave was dead, that would be the best. As long as everyone guarded the entrance of the cave, Su Zimo would starve to death in no time. However, if this was only a tunnel in the mountain peak, Su Zimo would have long escaped if the joyful clan were to guard here. What was more troublesome was that if there was another exit to this cave, the joyful clan members did not know where it was. If they were to split up, they would be easily defeated by Su Zimo. However, if they gathered together to look for the exit, once they went in the wrong direction, Su Zimo would have long since disappeared. Motherf asterisk Kerr, this lowly commoner. Elder Chan gritted his teeth and cursed. Elder Qian pondered for a moment before he gritted his teeth and said, Chase? After a short pause, Elder Qian continued, Chan Bin, we have protective talismans. Even if Su Zimo gets close to us, he won't be able to break through our defenses. We will walk in front and protect Gong Liangjing and Lu Wancheng. Gong Liangjing and Lu Wancheng were the other two elders of the joyful clan. Although they were foundation establishment cultivators, they did not have any talismans and could only control inferior-grade spirit weapons. In the cultivation world, it was common for foundation establishment cultivators to control inferior-grade spirit weapons without talismans, especially in a small sect like the joyful clan. This was also the reason why alchemists, weapon refinement masters, talisman masters and array formation masters had a special status in the cultivation world. If there was a weapon refinement master who could refine middle-grade spirit weapons, many foundation establishment cultivators would have broken through the door to befriend them and exchange spirit stones for them. Elder Qian and Elder Chen's bodies shone with a layer of light shield. They were the first to enter the cave, followed closely by the rest of the joyful clan. The ground in the cave was uneven and full of potholes. There were many treasures in the storage bags of many Qi refinement warriors, but there was nothing to illuminate them. They could only rely on the faint light emitted by the protective talismans on Elder Qian and Elder Chan to walk forward quickly. The faces of the joyful clan members who were following behind were pale and tense. They looked around, fearing that Su Zimo would suddenly jump out and kill them by surprise. Although Gong Liangjing and Lu Wancheng were foundation establishment cultivators, their palms were sweating at this moment. They walked in the cave with fear and trepidation. The atmosphere was getting more and more stifling. Even the slightest movement in the cave would cause a commotion among the crowd. Elder Qian and Elder Chan walked in front. The first thing they paid attention to was their feet, followed by their sides. However, they did not lift their heads to look. Subconsciously, everyone thought that Su Zimo could not fly in the air. Naturally, it was impossible for him to appear above their heads. However, they had forgotten something. This was a cave. Above the cave was a stone wall. At this moment, there was a person who was clinging tightly to the stone wall. He squinted his eyes and looked coldly at the joyful clan members who were walking past him. Suddenly, Elder Qian stopped in his tracks and said in a low voice, "Something is wrong. There is a strong smell of blood. This lad is nearby." Before he finished his words, a glaring saber gleam cut through the darkness in the cave. Poof! A huge head flew up and fresh blood splattered in the crowd. The joyful clan members were in an uproar. Elder Lu. Elder Lu is dead. Where is he? Above us. Ah! There was another tragic cry. A Qi refinement warrior died on the spot. Before this, Su Zimo had shot 5 arrows to test the remaining 4 Foundation Establishment cultivators. 2 of them had defensive means similar to the Vajra talisman. Given his current strength, it was impossible for him to break them. Therefore, Su Zimo's saber was aimed at Lu Wanqing and Gong Liangjing, who did not have any protective talismans. However, Gong Liangjing was more alert. The moment Elder Qian stopped in his tracks, he realized that something was amiss. He bent down immediately and lay on the ground without caring about his dignity. He managed to escape the calamity. Su Zimo jumped down from the stone wall. When he wanted to give chase, Gong Liangjing had already escaped to the back of Elder Qian and Elder Chan. He broke out in cold sweat. At this moment, Su Zimo landed among the crowd of Qi refinement warriors. In the narrow and small cave, the Qi refinement warriors of the Joyful Clan did not have much space to dodge. Some of them even ran into Su Zimo in a panic. In the darkness, Su Zimo laughed coldly. "Ha ha ha! These few people are not enough to kill me." Poof! 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 Su Zimo did not even need to look. He held the cold moon saber in his hands and waved it casually. A Qi refinement warrior would be killed on the spot. Accompanied by the Qi refinement warrior's miserable shrieks, blood flashed continuously and splattered everywhere. In this cave, Su Zimo was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. He slashed left and right and went on a rampage. The Qi refinement warriors of the Joyful Clan did not have the ability to retaliate at all. Even escaping was an extravagant hope. This was an ambush targeted at the Joyful Clan. Could be said to be perfect. Su Zimo made use of his familiarity with the terrain of the Conglang mountain range and successfully lured the other party into the deep and dark cave. The advantage of the cultivators was minimized, while Su Zimo's advantage was maximized. The 3 elders of the Joyful Clan stood rooted to the ground. Perspiration broke out on their foreheads and they did not take any action. It was not that they did not want to. It was because Su Zimo had been shuttling in and out of the crowd. His movements were agile and swift. The lighting in the cave was very weak. Once they took action, they would definitely hurt the sect disciples by mistake. Seeing that there were fewer and fewer sect disciples, there was a flash of ruthlessness in Elder Qian's eyes. He said in a low voice, "Take action." "What?" The 2 elders were shocked. "I said take action." Elder Qian said coldly, "We can't care so much. Even if we hurt the sect disciples by mistake, it's better than all of them dying in the hands of this lad." Chapter 45. In the darkness, the 3 elders of the Joyful Clan looked gloomy and uncertain. Almost at the same time, the 3 of them took out their spirit weapons. 2 were inferior grade and 1 was middle grade. Swoosh! 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 The spirit weapons shone brightly, exuding a cold murderous aura as they sped forward. Poof! Poof! The 2 Joyful Clan disciples were caught off guard and were killed on the spot by the spirit weapons of the Elder Qian trio. The spirit weapons did not stop there. They went straight for Su Zimo's vital points. The space in the cave was narrow and there was not much space for the Joyful Clan people to dodge. However, this meant that Su Zimo's movements were also greatly restricted. Su Zimo did not expect that the 3 elders of the Joyful Clan would be so ruthless and decisive. They actually disregarded the safety of their disciples and attacked forcefully. Su Zimo tilted his head and avoided the ring-shaped spirit weapon that posed the greatest threat to him. He lowered his body and avoided another flying sword. With a backhand slash, he slashed the Qi refinement warrior in front of him. Poof! However, at the same time, a cold light suddenly emerged from the chest of this Qi refinement warrior. Another flying sword emerged from his chest and went straight for Su Zimo's throat. It was too close. At this distance, Su Zimo had no time to dodge at all. Su Zimo took the opportunity to withdraw his cold moon saber and block this flying sword. Clang! The sound of the sword and saber colliding could be heard and sparks flew everywhere. Su Zimo's entire body shook violently. The webbing between his thumb and forefinger was torn and blood was gushing out. The cold moon saber almost flew out of his hands. Since the start of the fight, Su Zimo had been avoiding going head-to-head with the Foundation Establishment cultivators. True enough, the power of the flying sword controlled by the Foundation Establishment cultivators was not something that his current physical body could withstand. Su Zimo's entire right arm was numb, and he could not exert any strength at that moment. The power of the inferior-grade spirit weapon controlled by the early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators was already so strong. If he were to go head-to-head with Elder Qian's ring-shaped middle-grade spirit weapon, Su Zimo might be crippled on the spot. Of course, Su Zimo's strike was not completely useless. Elder Qian's flying sword should have pierced Su Zimo's chest, but it was slightly deflected by the cold moon saber and pierced through Su Zimo's shoulder, causing blood to spurt out. This was the first time Su Zimo had been injured since the start of the fight. The pain in his shoulder blade was unbearable, and he could barely use his left arm. So strong! Su Zimo was secretly shocked. Even in the face of a perfected chi refinement warrior, Su Zimo could also go head-on with him and come out unscathed. But even though he was only at the early stage of Foundation establishment, his strength had already reached a terrifying level. Fortunately, although Su Zimo's right arm was sore and numb, it didn't suffer too much of an impact. After resting for a while, he could continue fighting. Su Zimo did not dare to stay here any longer. He turned around and used the mountain lean to knock away the few chi refinement warriors in front of him. Then, he used his movement skill and sped out of the cave. Su Zimo did not know that at this very moment, Elder Qian and the other two were even more shocked. Disbelief was written all over their faces. Not dead. He actually blocked old Qian's sword? How is that possible? He is actually alive and kicking. He even has the strength to escape? Elder Qian made a prompt decision and called out, "Chase after him quickly. This lad is injured. He can't run far." The three elders were the first to chase after him. The remaining chi refinement warriors from the Joyful clan also hurried after him. They really did not wish to stay in this cave for a moment longer. Before they entered the cave, there were over 80 chi refinement warriors. Now there were only over 50 of them left. Most of them died in the hands of Su Zimo. A few of them died in the hands of the sect elders. In fact, everyone knew clearly in their hearts that no matter what the outcome of this trip was, the Joyful clan had already lost. 5 Foundation Establishment cultivators led over 100 chi refinement warriors. Almost half of the sect's strength had been mobilized to chase after a mortal. Yet, nearly half of them were killed instead. 2 elders were dead. The remaining chi refinement warriors were also in a state of shock and inexplicable fear. "We have to kill him." Elder Qian gritted his teeth, his face gloomy. Elder Chun revealed a ferocious expression. He said fiercely, "It would be best if we can capture him alive. I want him to suffer for the rest of his life. I will then grind his bones and scatter his ashes, dismembering his body into thousands of pieces. We can't let that Su family off too. Kill them until their blood flows like a river. Leave no one alive." Gong Liangjing said coldly. Everyone from the Joyful clan chased out of the cave. Although it was still snowing heavily outside, the sight before them suddenly became clear. They had finally gotten rid of the suffocating oppression in the cave. Over there. Elder Qian pointed to the front. Not far away, Su Zimo was still running non-stop. His left arm was drooping and dripping with blood. It looked extremely glaring on the snowy ground. Chase after him. Everyone from the Joyful clan leaped into the air and sped forward. "Brother Qian, the spirit energy on the protection talisman will not last for long. We have to quickly subdue this lad," Elder Chun said in a low voice. "Once the protection talisman loses its effect, our lives will also be in danger. If the talisman was released, it would not be effective for a long time. After a period of time, the spirit energy on the talisman would dissipate and it would lose its effect." Elder Chun only had this protection talisman with him. Once it lost its effect, he would be no different from Gong Liangjing. If he were to encounter the situation in the cave again, it would be difficult for him to escape death. Elder Qian nodded. In actual fact, he still had a protection talisman in his storage bag. However, the talisman was precious and he did not want to waste it. Elder Qian stepped on the flying sword and chanted a spell with both hands. In the wind and snow, a mysterious force suddenly gushed in. As if it had been summoned by something, it surged towards Elder Qian's fingertips. Earth-sinking skill. Elder Qian suddenly pointed in the direction where Su Zimo had escaped. Long before this, Su Zimo had already felt his heart palpitating. Upon hearing Elder Qian's voice, Su Zimo hurriedly stopped in his tracks. Rumble. Just in front of Su Zimo, the ground seemed to have been hit by some force. It suddenly collapsed and a huge pit appeared. If Su Zimo was not prepared, his legs would give way and he would fall into this deep pit directly. What is this? Su Zimo's eyes were filled with bewilderment. He had long expected that Foundation establishment cultivators might have some mysterious methods. However, the scene before him had truly exceeded his understanding. Wood binding skill. Just as Su Zimo was stunned for a moment, another voice sounded in his ears. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he knew that something was wrong. He wanted to go around the huge pit in front of him and escape to the other side. Unexpectedly, just as Su Zimo was about to get up, a few withered vines suddenly extended from the snow beneath his feet and coiled around his feet tightly. Swoosh! 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 The sound of a spirit weapon tearing through the air could be heard. It was soul-stirring. At that moment, Su Zimo's body was restricted and he could not dodge. If he was hit by the spirit weapon, he would die on the spot. Su Zimo did not panic in the face of danger. He fell to the ground and held the cold moon saber in a reverse grip, slashing at the vines that coiled around his feet. Snap! The vines broke. At the same time, the densely packed spirit weapons had also arrived in front of him. Su Zimo clenched his teeth. His body twisted to the limit and his tendons contracted. A series of crackling sounds could be heard from the bones in his body. He narrowly avoided the 3 spirit weapons of the joyful clan elder. After avoiding the 3 spirit weapons, Su Zimo could not avoid the 50 over spirit weapons that were coming at him. Although all the attackers were Qi refinement warriors, the simultaneous attack of more than 50 Qi refinement warriors was also a terrifying force that could not be ignored. In an instant, the situation became extremely dangerous. Su Zimo's life was hanging by a thread. Chapter 46. He had no other choice but to face it head-on. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo activated the petrification of flesh and blood. His muscles tightened and his tendons trembled. His physical strength was unleashed to the maximum. He held the saber with one hand and drew an arc in front of him rapidly. There were layers of saber shadows in cold light. Clang! 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 The spirit weapons kept colliding with the saber shadows in front of Su Zimo. The sound of metal clashing could be heard continuously. Sparks flew everywhere. Su Zimo staggered and kept retreating. There was a sweet taste in his throat. A mouthful of blood was in his mouth, but he did not spit it out. Su Zimo gritted his teeth and held on. Once he let go of this breath, he would die on the spot. Crash! Su Zimo's body fell heavily into the big pit not far away. He vomited blood and the cold moon saber fell out of his hand. His palm was badly mutilated and trembling. Although he had withstood the attacks of more than 50 Qi refinement warriors, Su Zimo was also seriously injured. Under such a violent impact, Su Zimo's physical body broke apart. His entire body was covered with cracks. Fresh blood seeped out and dyed his green robe red. The snowflakes landed on Su Zimo's body and were instantly melted by the warm blood. Su Zimo's face was pale. He moaned and struggled to sit up. However, he felt that his bones and tendons were about to break. The piercing pain was madly stimulating his brain. Under such intense stimulation, Su Zimo's body trembled and convulsed uncontrollably. Everyone from Joyful Clan surrounded the edge of the huge pit, looking down at Su Zimo from above. Their eyes were filled with excitement, mixed with some wariness. Finally, this person was going to die. Everyone felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. If they continued to give chase, this person would hide in another cave. Everyone from Joyful Clan, including Elder Qian, dared not guarantee that they would have the guts to follow him in. Elder Qian and the other two had been in the cultivation world for decades. They had also had many life and death battles with cultivators. However, they had never met such a tricky person. The most terrifying thing was that this person was not a cultivator but a mortal without spirit energy. Ha ha ha, Su Zimo laughed. Every time he smiled, more blood would flow out of his mouth. It was a horrifying sight. Upon hearing Su Zimo's laughter, many Qi refinement warriors felt a chill down their spines. What AF * King Lunatic? A Qi refinement warrior scolded softly. Su Zimo's smile made Gong Liangjing's hair stand on end. His face was gloomy as he said coldly, "I'll kill him." As he spoke, Gong Liangjing was about to take out his flying sword and cut off Su Zimo's head. "Wait." Elder Chan stopped Gong Liangjing and sneered. "Look at his half-dead appearance. Are you still afraid that he will run away? Let's spare his life first and bring him back to the sect to torture him. Let him beg for death." "What are you laughing at?" At this moment, Elder Qian narrowed his eyes and stared at Su Zimo. There was a trace of mockery in Su Zimo's eyes. He turned his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Do you really think that you have one? Remember my words. Songlang Mountain Range is your grave." As soon as he finished his words, Su Zimo roared from the depths of his throat, "Sanguine Ape Transformation." Sanguine Ape Transformation was the last move of the Sanguine Ape 3 styles. In Dai Yu's words, this move was the essence and was also a forbidden skill. It should not be used unless it was a life and death situation. Su Zimo circulated the incantation of Sanguine Ape Transformation frantically as he breathed in and out continuously. If he did not use it at this juncture, he would not have another chance. Upon hearing the 3 words Sanguine Ape Transformation, everyone from the Joyful Clan was shocked. Elder Qian and the other 2 shuddered and instinctively took half a step back. Everyone looked solemn as they stared at Su Zimo, who was in the deep pit, ready to strike at any time. However, after more than 10 breaths, Su Zimo was still sitting in the deep pit, expressionless and motionless. There was no change. Su Zimo's heart gradually sank to the bottom of the valley. How could this be? After circulating the incantation of Sanguine Ape Transformation, there were no changes in his body. Su Zimo could still feel the pain coming from all parts of his body and he felt weak all over. Back when he was besieged by the wolf pack, Su Zimo had just cultivated the tendons transformation section. He did not have enough conditions and could not release the Sanguine Ape Transformation. And now, Su Zimo had already started cultivating the bone strengthening section. Why was there no reaction when he circulated the incantation of Sanguine Ape Transformation? This was Su Zimo's last trump card. In the end, when he took it out, he realized that this trump card could not be used. As Sanguine Ape Transformation was a forbidden skill, Su Zimo had never released it before. This was the first time. Su Zimo's first reaction was that he was cultivating wrongly. Something must have gone wrong somewhere. Su Zimo racked his brains trying to solve this puzzle. However, this was not the cultivation field. Su Zimo did not have Dai Yu beside him. Instead, there was a group of cultivators who were eyeing him covetously with murderous intent. No one could solve his puzzle and the other party would not give him too much time either. Everyone from Joyful Clan waited for a while but realized that there was no movement on Su Zimo's body. They had been fooled. Everyone was enraged. Damn it, this lowly commoner still has the mood to fool us. A Qi refinement warrior cursed loudly. Kill him! Kill him! The crowd was agitated and many Qi refinement warriors were shouting from above. Almost everyone's attention was on Su Zimo. No one noticed that in the forest behind them, there was a tall figure swinging the tree branches in the wind and snow. He was approaching the Joyful Clan group at an extremely fast speed. His eyes were flashing with a bloody glow and his murderous intent was raging. "Oh!" Su Zimo exclaimed softly. Suddenly, he smelled a familiar pungent smell. He looked up instinctively. Just behind the Joyful Clan group, a tall figure leaped down from the towering ancient tree. He descended from the sky in a menacing manner. He was holding a primordial chaos iron rod in his hands and swept it towards the Qi refinement warriors in front. Poof! 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 The heads of 5 Qi refinement warriors were smashed by the rod on the spot. Their brains were splattered and their headless corpses fell into the pit. Spirit beast! It's a spirit beast! Everyone be careful! Cries of alarm could be heard from the crowd. Damn monkey! Su Zimo was overjoyed. The tall figure that rushed over to help was the spirit monkey that had lived together with Su Zimo in Songlang Mountain Range for half a year. The primordial chaos iron rod in the hands of the spirit monkey was the inferior grade spirit weapon of the joyful clan Qi refinement warrior, who died in the hands of Su Zimo back then. It was unknown when the spirit monkey picked it up and used it as a weapon. The joy in Su Zimo's heart had just risen when it turned into worry. Although the spirit monkey was powerful, it could only defeat the Qi refinement warriors. After all, it had not grown to the level of a spirit demon. Moreover, the spirit monkey was the same as Su Zimo. They had the same weakness. They could not fly. At the thought of this, Su Zimo shouted loudly, "Damn monkey, get lost!" JJ. The spirit monkey grinned. It seemed that it did not hear Su Zimo's shout. After killing 5 Qi refinement warriors with one strike of the rod, it did not stop in its tracks. It leaped into the pit, grabbed Su Zimo and carried him on its back. It fled outside directly without looking back. The spirit monkey was very smart. Although it could not tell the level of a cultivator, it could understand the situation. Since Su Zimo was beaten up so badly and had no way to escape, it was definitely not a match for him. Therefore, the first thing that the spirit monkey thought of was not to fight head-on with the joyful clan but to bring Su Zimo and escape from this place. Chapter 47. Where did this bastard come from? How dare he spoil our joyful clan's plans? Elder Qian flew into a rage. After a momentary daze, he mounted his flying sword and soared into the sky, leading the joyful clan members to chase after the spirit beast. Beams of spiritual light sped across the sky. Elder Qian's face was ghastly pale. He glared at Elder Chan, gritted his teeth and scolded, "You jinx!" Just now, Elder Chan had just said that Su Zimo was severely injured. How could he escape? In the end, a spirit monkey appeared out of nowhere. Not only did it kill a few sect disciples, it even rescued Su Zimo. Elder Chan had an innocent look on his face. Elder Chan had been scolded twice by Elder Qian because he was chasing after Su Zimo. He was also filled with anger and had nowhere to vent it. Elder Chan looked at the spirit monkey that was running far away. His eyes were filled with resentment. He said coldly, "This bastard's speed is not fast. It won't be able to escape for long." Just like half a year ago when Su Zimo was besieged by the wolf pack, when he was in the most dangerous situation, the spirit monkey would step forward bravely and pull him back from the gates of hell. However, this time was different from half a year ago. The spirit monkey had the ability to move mountains and climb rocks. It could jump and wander in the forest as though it was walking on flat ground. However, it was not good at speed. Moreover, the spirit monkey was carrying a person on its back. Su Zimo made use of the environment, terrain and other external factors to cause the joyful clan to suffer great losses. However, it was also because of these factors that it was difficult for the spirit monkey to escape the joyful clan's eyes. External factors were a double-edged sword. It was beneficial to oneself and also to the enemy. Early winter had arrived. Heavy snow was falling. Although the ancient trees were still there, they were bare. Without the cover of the lush forest and dense foliage, the spirit monkey's escaping figure and trajectory could be seen clearly on the snowy ground. Su Zimo was weak all over. He lay on the spirit monkey's back, feeling the whistling of the wind beside his ears. He felt sorrowful and said in a low voice, "Damn monkey, we can't escape. Put me down and leave by yourself." The spirit monkey did not make a sound. White air was coming out of its nostrils as it ran forward continuously. It was drenched in sweat. It was obvious that it had exerted all its strength and its physical strength was depleted. The sound of clothes fluttering in the wind was getting closer and closer. The sword kinesis flight speed of the Qi refinement warriors was obviously much faster than that of the spirit monkeys. Su Zimo sighed softly, "Monkey, these people want to kill me. Put me down and you still have a chance to escape. If this continues, you and I will be caught up in less than 15 minutes and die here." The spirit monkey remained silent. It had an unruly expression and a sharp gaze. It continued to run forward stubbornly. Su Zimo gritted his teeth. He hardened his heart and punched the spirit monkey's shoulder. He shouted, "If you abandon me, only one person will die. If you bring me along, all of us will die. Why can't you understand such simple logic? Why don't you understand? Damned monkey, aren't you very smart and quick-witted? Are you stupid? Get out of my sight." Roar. The spirit monkey's eyes were red. Suddenly it let out an earth-shattering roar. The snowflakes on the surrounding ancient trees were shaken off. The joyful clan members who were chasing closely behind were shocked when they heard the spirit monkey's sudden roar. Fear? Anger? Or despair? They did not understand. But Su Zimo could understand. "I am happy to do so. It's none of your business." This was the spirit monkey's response to him. The spirit monkey was not stupid. From the moment it saved Su Zimo, it knew that they might die here. But the spirit monkey still saved him. Half a year ago, the spirit monkey saved Su Zimo because it had a feud with the wolf clan. Half a year later, the spirit monkey saved Su Zimo because it saw him as a brother who went through thick and thin together. This was the tacit understanding between a man and a monkey. There was no need for words to understand each other. Su Zimo was silent for a while before he laughed. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo laughed heartily. The joyful clan members were puzzled. They did not understand why Su Zimo could still laugh. Moreover, he laughed so freely and happily. Their hearts were already numb. They could not understand the friendship between Su Zimo and the spirit monkey. In everyone's eyes, the spirit monkey was a beast that had yet to develop intelligence. Su Zimo was also a person who was struggling at death's door. But the happier Su Zimo laughed, the angrier they were. Attack! At Elder Qian's command, many flying swords tore through the wind and snow. Rays of light filled the sky as they sped towards them. In this short period of time, the distance between both parties was getting closer and closer. They had already entered the attacking range of the joyful clan members. The spirit monkey ran left and right. At times it would bend and jump. It tried its best to dodge with all its might. Poof! Blood flashed. The spirit monkey's body trembled and its footsteps staggered. Thereafter, it straightened its body and continued to run as if nothing had happened. Su Zimo lowered his head and saw that the spirit monkey's thigh had been pierced by a flying sword. Blood was gushing out. There was a string of scarlet and glaring blood marks on the snowy ground behind it. Su Zimo felt a sharp pain in his heart. He could clearly sense that just now the sword was originally aimed at his back. But at the last moment the spirit monkey suddenly jumped up. The spirit monkey sensed Su Zimo's worry. It tilted its head and grinned. It looked silly, as if it wanted to reassure Su Zimo. Su Zimo's vision gradually became blurry. He did not know if it was because the wind and snow were too heavy or because of other reasons. The spirit monkey's speed had obviously slowed down. Its footsteps were not as nimble and agile as before. It was limping, looking a little pathetic and pitiful. Its thigh had been pierced. It was excruciating. How could it be all right? However, the spirit monkey did not give up. Suddenly, the spirit monkey threw away the mixed yuan steel rod casually. It pulled Su Zimo down from its back and hugged him in front of its chest. It was just a simple action, but Su Zimo understood it immediately. The spirit monkey was worried about the flying sword coming from behind. It was worried that the flying sword would stab Su Zimo at the first instance. Therefore, it hugged Su Zimo in front of its chest and exposed its back to the flying sword. The joyful clan people chased even more closely and the distance between them shortened. All of a sudden, the corner of Su Zimo's eyes twitched violently. His scalp was numb and his hair stood on end. It was extremely dangerous. The cold moon saber was not by his side. Su Zimo took down the sanguine crystal bow immediately. He glanced sideways and saw a ring-shaped spirit weapon among the many flying swords behind the spirit monkey. There were 2 dazzling and eye-catching spirit patterns on it. The spirit monkey did not sense the threat of this ring-shaped spirit weapon. It barely avoided the many flying swords. There were a few more wounds on its body. Blood and flesh were exposed. It looked ferocious and terrifying. This ring-shaped spirit weapon was aimed at the spirit monkey's back. There was no way to dodge it. Su Zimo bit the tip of his tongue and exhausted the last bit of energy in his body. He lifted the sanguine crystal bow and smashed it hard at the ring-shaped spirit weapon. Clang! Su Zimo's body shook violently and the sanguine crystal bow slipped out of his hands. Su Zimo's entire right arm exploded into a cloud of blood mist. His skin exploded and his tendons broke. All the bones in his arm were broken and drooped down. This was a middle-grade spirit weapon. It was a full-force attack from a middle-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Su Zimo could not withstand it at all. The ring-shaped spirit weapon was blocked by the sanguine crystal bow. It paused for a moment before it smashed heavily on the spirit monkey's back. Crash! The spirit monkey's back caved in deeply. A horrifying sound of bones cracking could be heard. Its body shook violently. Carrying Su Zimo, it was sent flying and landed on the snowy ground not far away. Chapter 48. A man and a monkey fell onto the icy cold snowy ground. The spirit monkey spat out a mouthful of blood, which landed on Su Zimo's body and splattered all over his face. Su Zimo's mouth was filled with the spirit monkey's warm blood. The spirit monkey turned sideways. Its eyelids drooped and its pupils dilated. It stared at Su Zimo in a daze. Its eyes were filled with indignation, nostalgia, reluctance, and regret. In the end it closed its eyes. Monkey! Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he called out to it. The spirit monkey remained motionless. The vitality in its body was depleting rapidly. A mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator wielded a middle-grade spirit weapon and attacked with all his might. The damage done to the spirit monkey was devastating. If Su Zimo had not used the sanguine crystal bow to block the attack, the spirit monkey's body would have been penetrated or even torn into pieces. Su Zimo wriggled his body in the snowy ground and crawled to the spirit monkey's side. He stretched out his left palm that was still intact and slapped the spirit monkey's face continuously. He said in a trembling voice, "Monkey, wake up. Don't die." The spirit monkey did not make a sound. It seemed to have fallen asleep. Su Zimo lowered his head. The black hair in front of his eyes scattered and covered his pair of eyes that were gradually turning red. It was not light red or dark red. It was the scarlet red of blood. It was dazzling, strange, and terrifying. Su Zimo was already covered with cuts and bruises. The spirit monkey's blood had splattered all over his body. In addition to the blood that he had just swallowed, there was already a trace of the spirit monkey's blood in his veins. This trace of spirit monkey's blood was circulating crazily in his body, producing many strange and crazy changes. Su Zimo's blood was boiling. Other than Su Zimo himself, no one from the Joyful clan could feel this change. The Joyful clan members stood still in midair, surrounding the man and the monkey. They finally heaved a sigh of relief. Elder Chun felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He swallowed his saliva and laughed softly. Although there were some mistakes, at least they did not escape. Upon hearing this, Elder Chin's face sank. Just as he was about to tilt his head and ask Elder Chun to shut his mouth, a voice filled with murderous intent rang in his ears. "Today you will all die." Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Su Zimo, who had been kneeling in the snow, suddenly stand up and slowly turn his head. The cold wind blew, revealing a pair of blood-red eyes. Hiss! Being stared at by this pair of blood-red eyes, everyone suddenly felt a chill run down their spines and couldn't help but gasp. Blood! Ape transformation! As soon as he said that, the power of the bloodline in Su Zimo's body surged wildly. His tendons trembled and his flesh was filled. His body expanded explosively and actually rose to a height of 10 feet. Tenjong was already more than 3 meters tall, which was double the height of an ordinary person. Although the Joyful clan people were flying in the air, they were only about 10 feet above the ground. If the distance was too far, his control over the spiritual artifact would inevitably weaken. However, Su Zimo's current height had already reached 10 feet. Looking straight ahead, he could see the Joyful clan members. Compared to Su Zimo, everyone suddenly seemed somewhat insignificant. What kind of monster is this? Some of the Qi refinement warriors were so scared that their faces turned pale. Their voices were trembling. Giant! No, it was not the appearance of a human. Sanguine ape transformation. Not only did it change the body size and height, but even Su Zimo's appearance had also undergone a huge change. He looked ferocious and somewhat similar to the spirit monkey lying on the ground. Giant ape. The muscles on Su Zimo's body were knotted together as if they had been poured with molten steel. They shone with a metallic luster and were filled with explosive power. That pair of blood-red eyes exuded endless murderous intent. Wherever the blood-red eyes passed by, the wind and snow seemed to have solidified. Kill! Su Zimo let out a furious roar from the depths of his throat. He took a step forward, stretched out his left arm, opened his palm and directly grabbed Gong Liangjing, who was in midair. Su Zimo hated the 3 Foundation establishment cultivators from the Joyful clan to the core. If not for them, the spirit monkey would not have suffered such serious injuries, and it was unknown whether it was dead or alive. Gong Liangjing's reaction was slightly slower. Just as he was about to turn his flying sword around and speed up to the sky, he unexpectedly blacked out. Su Zimo's palm had already enveloped him and grabbed him directly. He squeezed hard. Poof! Blood mist filled the air. Early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator Gong Liangjing was crushed by Su Zimo's palm. At this moment, Elder Qian and Elder Chan had just flown to a height of 20 feet. They instinctively turned back and saw this bloody and tragic scene. They could not help but tremble in fear. It's no wonder that Su Zimo's body is so terrifying. It's because he is not from the human race but the demon race. He is a spirit beast. Elder Qian said coldly with a lingering fear. Should we go back and report to the sect first before we bring more men over? Elder Chan was also a little scared. Elder Qian waved his hands and said, "Don't worry. Su Zimo has used some demonic arts to stimulate the potential in his body. He won't be able to hold on for long." As soon as he finished his words, Elder Qian caught a glimpse of a scene from the corner of his eye. He could not help but be scared out of his wits. He did not even have the time to call out to Elder Chan before he fled to the side in a panic. Boom! Su Zimo's feet landed heavily on the ground. He bent his legs slightly and subsequently leaped into the air. Leaping was not worth making a fuss about. However, Su Zimo's leap was more than 10 feet high. How strong was his body and how terrifying was the outburst of power. Elder Chan heard a deafening sound beside his ears. He was slightly distracted and felt his vision darken. Instinctively, he lifted his head to take a look. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already arrived above his head. The huge sole of his foot landed with a force that could destroy everything. He stomped down. Boom! The sole of his foot landed on the top of Elder Chen's head. The protection talisman shone brightly and trembled violently. Cracks actually appeared on it. It had been some time since this protection talisman was released. There was not much spirit chi left on it. Under the impact of Su Zimo's violent force, it was on the verge of collapse and could shatter at any time. Once he lost the protection talisman in front of Su Zimo, Elder Chan was no different from other chi refinement warriors. Elder Chan turned pale with fright. Just as he was about to escape on his flying sword, another sole of his foot stomped down again. There was almost no pause. The force this time was even more ferocious and unyielding. Divine chariot trampling. The force of each stomp would increase and become stronger. Kacha! The protection talisman started to shatter. Another stomp. Poof! Elder Chan was trampled to death by Su Zimo directly. He was crushed into meat paste. In the blink of an eye, 2 out of the 3 remaining elders of Joyful Clan were dead. Only Elder Qian, who was at the mid-stage Foundation establishment realm, was left. Elder Qian knew that the next Su Zimo would definitely look for him. Swoosh! Elder Qian steered his flying sword and kept ascending into the sky. He wanted to get as far away from Su Zimo as possible. No matter how strong Su Zimo was and how powerful he was, he could not fly. This was his weakness. 30 feet, 40 feet. In the blink of an eye, Elder Qian had already ascended to a height of 50 feet. It was only until this moment that Elder Qian's expression softened. He calmed down and turned back to look. Oh! Elder Qian was shocked. He exclaimed softly, "Where is he?" Su Zimo had actually disappeared from the battlefield. How could that be possible? It was impossible for him to escape from this place in such a short period of time. Right at this moment, a few chi refinement warriors from Joyful Clan not far away pointed in the direction of Elder Qian. They were horrified as if they had seen something that terrified them. Chapter 49. Swoosh. Behind Elder Qian, the sound of snowflakes falling could be heard. Elder Qian was shocked and turned back instinctively. Behind him, there was a towering ancient tree that was at least 80 feet tall. Using both his hands and legs, Su Zimo was like a gigantic ape as he climbed up the ancient tree as though he was walking on flat ground. He had already reached a height of 50 feet. Elder Qian rose into the air on his sword, while Su Zimo climbed with the help of the ancient tree. Both of their speeds were about the same. Sanguine Ape transformation made use of the power of his bloodline. Not only could it increase Su Zimo's physical strength for a short period of time, it could also change his body's agility, coordination and flexibility greatly, and increase his speed. The moment Elder Qian turned back, he saw Su Zimo shooting out from the ancient tree. His eyes were bloodshot and his killing intent was torrential. Reaching out with his gigantic palm, he enveloped Elder Qian. Su Zimo's palm looked soft like a tongue. It curled around Elder Qian's body gently and released a twisting and tearing force that was extremely ferocious. Piak! Elder Qian's body trembled and his protection talisman shattered on the spot. Go! Elder Qian's expression changed drastically. Stepping on his flying sword, he tried his best to stabilize his body. In a panic, he hurriedly summoned the ring-shaped spirit weapon in his hand and smashed it towards Su Zimo's chest. Both parties were extremely close. Coupled with the fact that Su Zimo was in midair and had no place to borrow strength, Su Zimo could only fall backwards if he wanted to avoid the incoming ring-shaped spirit weapon. However, if that happened, Su Zimo would also fall from midair. Su Zimo's bloodshot eyes were filled with ruthlessness. Facing the ring-shaped spirit weapon, he did not retreat or avoid it. Instead, he turned his palm into a fist and used his fist as a seal. His left arm drew a gigantic arc in midair. With a boom, the seal fell. After the bovine-tongued saber, it was followed by the sanguine ape seal. Su Zimo would rather bear the impact of a middle-grade spirit weapon to kill Elder Qian with his fist. Elder Qian was truly panicking. He could clearly feel Su Zimo's determination to die together with him. As soon as the ring-shaped spirit artifact left his hand, Elder Qian couldn't care too much. He patted his storage bag and took out a brand new talisman, which he immediately crushed. Elder Qian's face revealed a pained expression. Every single talisman was too precious to him. These talismans were Elder Qian's final life-saving talismans. They could even block a wave of attacks from a Foundation establishment cultivator. But now, in pursuit of a mortal, 2 of his talismans had been destroyed in succession. Bang! The ring-shaped spirit tool smashed directly into Su Zimo's chest, as if it had been defeated. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Su Zimo's chest had caved in deeply, and his flesh was badly mangled. If Elder Qian hadn't been distracted by crushing the talisman, causing the ring-shaped spirit artifact's energy to be insufficient, even if Su Zimo had released the Blood Ape transformation, he would have been killed on the spot. At the same time, Su Zimo's fist transformed into a large seal and heavily smashed onto Elder Qian's head. Boom! The large seal and the light barrier formed by the talisman collided with a deafening bang. The air billowed and the surrounding snowflakes evaporated instantly. I blocked it. Elder Qian couldn't be bothered to rejoice as he rode his flying sword, and escaped from the spot immediately. As for Su Zimo, he fell from midair and spat out blood. However, the ferocity in his eyes did not diminish as he glared fiercely at Elder Qian, who was escaping into the air. Bang! Su Zimo fell heavily onto the snowy ground. Before long, he flipped over and stood up, panting heavily. Each time he breathed, there was a thick stench of blood. This was a sign that his internal organs were severely injured. There was a chance of recovery after 100 days of recuperation. However, injuries to the internal organs were extremely difficult to heal. Furthermore, no one knew the condition of his body better than Su Zimo. Just now, Elder Qian's internal organs were already shattered. He wouldn't be able to live for long. Elder Qian hid in the air and hovered around. He did not leave. In Songlang mountain range, there wasn't an ancient tree that had such a height. Elder Qian would not give Su Zimo another chance to get close. Su Zimo clenched his fists. Suddenly, he carried the spirit monkey whose fate was unknown and ran wildly in one direction. Although the sanguine ape transformation allowed Su Zimo's strength to increase tremendously within a short period of time, it did not have the effect of healing. In other words, the injuries on Su Zimo's body were still there. After this intense battle, the injuries in his body had worsened by a lot. The sanguine ape transformation caused Su Zimo to enter a frenzied state. His nerves were numb and he could not feel the pain in his body. Although Su Zimo seemed to be moving swiftly and nimbly, his body was already in tatters from the outside to the inside. He was only holding on with the power of his bloodline and his last breath. When the sanguine ape transformation's duration was up, Su Zimo would immediately revert to his original form and become even weaker. Seeing that Su Zimo had escaped, Elder Qian hurriedly rode on his flying sword and chased after him. This time the joyful clan had suffered heavy losses. He was the only one left among the 5 elders. If he did not kill Su Zimo here, he would not be able to account for it when he returned to the sect. After all, Elder Qian had been in the cultivation world for decades. He could tell that the current Su Zimo was an arrow at the end of its flight. He could not hold on for long. There were still over 50 Qi refinement warriors left in the joyful clan. Although they chased after him, they did not dare to get too close. They stayed far behind Su Zimo. Su Zimo's speed became slower and slower. His body also started to shrink and gradually reverted to his original appearance. Waves of weakness surged in his heart. He started to feel pain all over his body and it became increasingly clear. Su Zimo gritted his teeth and continued to run. There was a valley not far ahead. It was surrounded by steep mountain peaks that were thousands of feet tall. It looked ordinary and very quiet. Su Zimo came to this valley and revealed a trace of a smile. There was not much time left for the sanguine ape transformation. Su Zimo came to the valley and stopped in his tracks. He carried the spirit monkey and started to climb up the stone walls. There were many caves on the stone walls surrounding the valley. It was pitch black inside and there was no light at all. Everyone from the joyful clan looked at Su Zimo, who was covered in injuries. They still did not dare to go forward recklessly. They watched as Su Zimo climbed into a cave and did not make any movements. Finally, everyone could not tolerate it any longer. They rode on their flying swords and came to the top of the valley. Looking at the caves of various sizes on the stone walls surrounding the valley, Elder Qian frowned. A trace of uneasiness suddenly flashed past his heart. Right at this moment, Su Zimo suddenly appeared at the entrance of the cave. He was carrying a big purple bird in his hands. He looked at Elder Qian and the rest and smiled. That smile was a little strange and terrifying. It made one tremble with fear. Rip! Su Zimo pulled hard and directly broke the head of the big purple bird. Fresh blood flowed and a unique bloody smell permeated the wind and snow. Chirp! 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 Suddenly, a series of urgent chirps of birds reverberated in the valley. The chirps became louder and brighter. A commotion could be heard from the caves of various sizes. Right at this moment, Su Zimo's voice could be heard. It was calm, but it made everyone's heart sink to the bottom of the valley. I have said before that Songlang mountain range is your grave. As soon as he finished his words, Su Zimo threw away the big purple bird in his hands casually and turned to enter the cave. In the caves surrounding the valley, streaks of purple lights flickered in the darkness. They were like the eyes of living creatures, emitting endless murderous intent. Chirp! Another sharp and ear-piercing chirp could be heard. It could pierce through gold and split rocks. Initially it was still far away. When everyone from the joyful clan reacted, a large black shadow had already shrouded the top of their heads, blocking the wind and snow. Chapter 50. Everyone from the joyful clan looked up and saw a huge eagle with a pair of purple wings hovering above the valley. It spread its huge wings, covering the sky and the sun. The feathers on the purple-winged eagle shone with a metallic luster and were indestructible. Its pair of sharp claws were powerful and seemed to be able to crush a mountain peak. This was obviously the leader of the purple-winged eagle. Its eyes were filled with endless fury and murderous intent. Spirit demon? Elder Qian's voice was trembling and his face was pale. In the eyes of cultivators, spirit demons could be divided into 2 types. One was the Foundation Establishment realm and the other was the Jindan realm. The purple-winged eagle in front of them should be at the Foundation Establishment realm. However, it was obviously much more powerful than Elder Qian. Most importantly, this spirit demon could fly. Screech! 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 Waves of angry cries could be heard from the caves around the valley. Many purple-winged eagles flew out from the caves. At one glance there were hundreds of them. Although these purple-winged eagles were spirit beasts, they were enough to tear the joyful clan people into pieces. There was truly no way out for him. They could not even escape. Su Zimo's words echoed in everyone's mind. In an instant everyone understood. Su Zimo came here to make use of the power of the purple-winged eagles in the Zhonglang mountain range to capture all of them in one fell swoop. This was their grave. No, we did not kill it. That purple-winged eagle, no, it was that person in the cave. A Qi refinement warrior was scared out of his wits and explained incoherently. It was just that this explanation sounded so weak. The demon race valued their territory very much. Not to mention human cultivators, even other spirit beasts and spirit demons would be attacked crazily by the purple-winged eagles. Although Su Zimo was the one who killed that purple-winged eagle, in the eyes of this group of purple-winged eagles, they had already categorized the joyful clan people and Su Zimo as the same. Detestable humans. Screech! The purple-winged eagles hovering in the sky let out a screech. In the next moment, hundreds of purple-winged eagles pounced towards the joyful clan people with murderous intent. At the same time, the leader of the purple-winged eagles swooped down. It opened a pair of sharp claws and went straight for Elder Qian's head. The joyful clan people were disheartened. This was a dead end. The moment they entered the valley, they could no longer get out. Outside the cave the wind was biting cold, but inside the cave it was very warm. Su Zimo was lying on a thick straw mattress on the cold ground. As he listened to the screams outside, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. "Monkey, did you hear that? The people who harmed you are all going to die," Su Zimo said softly. The spirit monkey was lying beside Su Zimo. Its eyes were closed and it did not respond. After living in Zhonglang mountain range for half a year, Su Zimo knew this place like the back of his hand. Both he and the spirit monkey knew which areas had spirit demons, and which areas were extremely dangerous. Su Zimo had already prepared for this plan. This was one of the most important reasons for choosing Zhonglang mountain range as the battlefield. On the warm straw mattress, there were a few oval-shaped bird eggs. There were faint purple stripes on the egg skin, which looked very beautiful. Su Zimo casually took 2 eggs and used the last of his strength to knock the 2 bird eggs together. Crack! Crack! A crack appeared on the bird eggs. Purplish gold liquid flowed out from within, emitting a rich fragrance. Su Zimo placed 1 egg near the mouth of the spirit monkey, and the other near his mouth. He sucked on it bit by bit and could not help but smile. "Monkey, aren't you obsessed with this bird egg? I brought you here today." The spirit monkey often mentioned to Su Zimo that the purple-winged eagle's egg was a great tonic and very delicious. However, there was a spirit demon purple-winged eagle here. Usually, the 2 of them did not dare to go near it. The proudest thing in the spirit monkey's life was that it had secretly eaten a purple-winged eagle's egg and escaped unscathed. Purple-winged eagles were one of the few flying beasts that would go through hibernation. The man and the monkey had long planned that when winter came, the purple-winged eagles would enter hibernation, and their senses of the outside world would be reduced. They would then come here to steal once. It was a pity that when winter arrived, Su Zimo left. The spirit monkey's lips were tightly shut. Purplish gold liquid flowed down from the corners of its mouth and onto the straw mat. There was no response at all. At the sight of this scene, Su Zimo's eyes dimmed. The fragrant liquid in his mouth instantly became tasteless. The tragic cries outside gradually faded. Elder Qian's hysterical shouts could be heard. "Su Zimo, even if I die, you won't be able to escape. Do you think that this bunch of beasts will let you off?" Elder Qian cried out in pain and then went silent. Su Zimo smiled. Since he had come here, Su Zimo did not intend to leave this place alive. This plan was to perish indiscriminately. It was just that Su Zimo did not expect that the spirit monkey would be implicated in the end. Su Zimo struggled to stand up and walked out of the cave. Looking at the 50 over corpses that were being eaten by the purple-winged eagles, he shook his head. A trace of mockery flashed past his eyes. So what if they were Foundation establishment cultivators? So what if they were cultivators? In the end, they would still die in a corner of this Zhonglang mountain range. No one would know. In fact, rather than saying that the joyful clan people had died under the purple-winged eagle's food, it was better to say that they had died in Su Zimo's scheme. From the moment the joyful clan people entered Songlang mountain range, they had already fallen into an invisible net. They were led by Su Zimo and walked step by step towards the abyss of death. In mid-air, the leader of the purple-winged eagle sensed something and suddenly lifted its head. Its cold gaze landed on Su Zimo. Its murderous intent was as sharp as a knife. Su Zimo had seen it on the first night in Songlang mountain range. The purple-winged eagles gradually stopped eating. They flapped their wings in mid-air and stared intently at Su Zimo. Once the leader gave the order, they would rush forward and tear Su Zimo into pieces. Screech! The spirit demon-level purple-winged eagles lifted their heads and screeched. Swoosh! Many purple-winged eagles swarmed over like a raging purple sea. In the next moment they would drown Su Zimo. In the face of impending death, Su Zimo's expression was calm. He did not retreat or panic. From the moment he stepped on the path of cultivation, Dayu had told him that he would experience unimaginable dangers and could lose his life at any time. Don't count on me to save you. At that time, Su Zimo replied that life and death were fated and wealth were up to the heavens. This moment had finally arrived. It was just that Su Zimo did not expect it to come so early. All of a sudden, in Su Zimo's vision in that purple sea, there was a flash of breathtaking blood that could not be ignored. It was as if it was going to dye the world red. A figure appeared and blocked in front of Su Zimo. Su Zimo opened his mouth slightly. First, there was a look of surprise in his eyes before it was filled with endless joy. The person who had arrived wore a long blood-red robe and had her back facing Su Zimo. She had a slim figure and long black hair draped down casually, fluttering in the wind. How dare you touch my man? Die! Although her tone was calm and her voice was pleasant and languid, there was a suffocating domineering aura to it. Suddenly Su Zimo felt like crying. He had imagined countless times that Dayu would appear at his most dangerous moment. However, he was disappointed time and time again. She still came. Chapter 51. Su Zimo widened his eyes, wanting to see Dayu's every move clearly. However, a wave of exhaustion overwhelmed him. He could not hold on any longer and collapsed. From the intense battle in the capital to killing Luo Qianwu at Jianan City, from the ambush in Songlang mountain range to the escape, Su Zimo had been running day and night for more than half a month without sleep and rest. He had already exhausted the last bit of energy in his body. The moment he closed his eyes, Su Zimo only saw Dayu extending her fair palm and blocking the surging purple ocean easily. The next moment, Dayu clenched her fist. The purple ocean exploded instantly, bursting into a beautiful blood mist. Su Zimo fainted. After some time, Su Zimo woke up slowly. He opened his eyes and sensed a familiar aura. This was the cultivation ground. Su Zimo soaked in the wooden bucket. It was as if he had returned to a year ago. Dayu sat on a green rock not far away. Her expression was cold and indifferent. It was unknown what she was thinking about. Where's the monkey? How is it? The first thing Su Zimo did when he woke up was to find out about the spirit monkey's condition. Dayu did not answer. Su Zimo hurriedly explained. There's a spirit monkey lying in the cave. It's my friend. It was severely injured in order to save me. Miss Dai, you must save it. Su Zimo was a little anxious but could not continue. Given Dayu's character, it was already unexpected that she would step forward to save him. Why would she care about the life and death of a spirit beast? After a while, Dayu said lightly, you don't have to care about it. Its physique is much stronger than yours. Ah? Su Zimo was stunned for a moment. Subsequently, he was overjoyed and asked, the monkey is still alive? Dayu was silent, as if she could not be bothered to reply. Su Zimo couldn't help but laugh. He nodded and muttered to himself, not bad, not bad. Since I survived, and the damned monkey's physique is stronger than mine, it must still be alive. Putting aside his worries, Su Zimo was puzzled. He could not help but ask, Miss Dai, although I'm not a demon, after cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, why is my physique still inferior to that damned monkey? The corner of Dayu's mouth twitched. You've only cultivated body tempering, tendons transformation and bones strengthening. The most difficult part of this cultivation method and the most significant changes to one's physique are at the back. You are still far from it. Su Zimo nodded and looked at his body. He found that his right arm, which was almost crippled, was now intact. There were no wounds on his body. How long have I slept? Su Zimo asked. 10 days. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. He had suffered such serious injuries and thought that he was lucky to be alive. There was no way for him to recover fully. To think that he would recover fully in 10 days after being rescued by Dai Yu. Not only that, after this battle, Su Zimo could clearly feel that his physique had become stronger. His strength was greater and his bones were tougher. He had already reached the realm of lesser mastery of bone strengthening. This method could be said to be reviving the dead. Was there anything that Dai Yu could not do? Although Dai Yu had warned Su Zimo not to ask about her background, Su Zimo often pondered about it in private. Who exactly was Dai Yu? What cultivation realm was she at? Suddenly, Su Zimo sensed something and looked up. On the green stone, Dai Yu looked at Su Zimo quietly. Her eyes were like water, clear and moving, rippling with light. For some reason, Su Zimo suddenly felt flustered. Miss Dai Yu, I'm leaving. Su Zimo's expression froze and his mind went blank. You're not coming back? That's right. Su Zimo went silent and was in low spirits. The joy of surviving a calamity had disappeared without a trace. Dai Yu said, I can't teach you any more in the future, so I planted a spirit root for you. It won't be any weaker than a heaven spirit root. You can find a sect to cultivate in from now on. You can plant a spirit root? Others can't, but I can. Dai Yu seemed to have thought of something as she smiled faintly. After you cultivate, you can also fly on your sword and won't be as pathetic as before. Cultivators could fly on their sword and take the head of their enemies from 1,000 miles away. It would be a lie to say that he was not envious. If he had heard this news before, Su Zimo would have been overjoyed. But now, Su Zimo was truly uninterested. Why? After a long silence, Su Zimo raised his head and asked, Do you know why I brought you on the path of cultivation? Dai Yu asked instead. Su Zimo shook his head. A year ago, when Su Zimo was at his lowest and almost lost everything, Dai Yu appeared before Su Zimo and asked him, Do you want to cultivate? That scene and those words were something that Su Zimo would never forget for the rest of his life. However, Su Zimo did not know why Dai Yu would impart to him the techniques of the demon race and teach him cultivation. There are 2 reasons. Firstly, when you met me 3 years ago, I was at my weakest. You brought me here to save my life. For the next 2 years, you made delicious food every day and delivered it to my door. Although I ignored you, I still remember it. At this point, Dai Yu stood up from the green stone and her entire aura changed. She exuded a sense of pride that was above the world and could not be looked at directly. She raised her voice and said, I, Dai Yu, have never begged anyone or owed anyone anything except you. Teaching you cultivation can be considered as settling this karma. Su Zimo was shocked. Who could guarantee that they had never begged anyone in their entire life? Even immortals could not avoid it. It was hard to imagine how difficult it would be to reach Dai Yu's level without begging anyone for their entire lives. There's another reason. I can see a shadow of myself in you. Dai Yu looked at Su Zimo and said, You look weak on the outside, but you have a ferocious tiger in your heart. It's just that this tiger has always been in a deep slumber. A year ago, the departure of your childhood sweetheart, and the bullying of perfected being Song Lang caused this tiger in your heart to awaken. Do you still remember how you reacted when that ruffian came to assassinate you a year ago? Su Zimo pursed his lips and did not say anything. You almost killed him. Dai Yu continued. Who would have thought that a weak scholar would have such a calm gaze and steady wrist when he was filled with killing intent while wielding a sharp knife? At that time, in my eyes, you were a piece of unpolished jade that had yet to be carved. You were born to wander in the cruel and bloody world of cultivation. Su Zimo was somewhat emotional. If Dai Yu had not brought him into cultivation back then, he might have died of depression for the rest of his life, not to mention the blood feud of the Su family. Even if he had a ferocious tiger in his heart, without a spirit root, he was just a tiger without claws. As though she could sense Su Zimo's worries, Dai Yu frowned and said doubtfully, Your potential is 1 in a million, but you lack a spirit root. Logically speaking, everyone should have a spirit root the moment they are born. It's just a matter of strength. However, in this world, many people do not have spirit roots. That's strange. Pausing for a moment, Dayu shook her head. Forget it. Every world hides its secrets. I don't have time to investigate. It's time to go. As she spoke, Dayu's figure moved and walked outside. Su Zimo jumped out of the wooden bucket hurriedly, grabbed a shirt and put it on before chasing after her. Chapter 52. Miss Dai, where are you going? Su Zimo chased her to the courtyard and shouted, unable to conceal the reluctance in his eyes. Of course it's my world. Dayu turned around and smiled at Su Zimo. She teased, you and I are from two different worlds. That was what Shen Mengqi said when she left Su Zimo. Now that it came out of Dayu's mouth, there wasn't the slightest hint of contempt. Instead, it was like two good friends who had known each other for many years were teasing each other, mixed with a trace of melancholy of parting. Dayu had never spoken to Su Zimo in such a tone and rarely smiled at him. It was only now that Su Zimo realized that Dayu was really leaving. But you haven't taught me the rest of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Why are you leaving? Su Zimo racked his brains and finally came up with a reason. Dayu shook her head. You already have spirit roots. Join an immortal sect in the future. Don't cultivate as a demon anymore. Why? Su Zimo frowned and said, I want to cultivate as an immortal. I want to cultivate as a demon too. Immortal and demon cultivation at the same time? Dayu raised her beautiful brows and could not help but laugh. You're quite ambitious. Pausing, Dayu asked, spirit qi can nourish and temper the body. Although it can't compare to demons, the body won't be too weak. But do you know why most cultivators have weak bodies? Why? There's a limit to a person's strength. Be it immortal or demon cultivation, there's no way to live forever. Immortal and demon cultivation at the same time. The biggest possibility is that you won't be able to reach the end of either path. Su Zimo thought for a moment and said, I want to give it a try. Dayu continued, if you're immortal and Buddhist cultivation at the same time, I won't stop you. But immortals and demons are different. Immortals are immortals and demons are demons. If you're immortal and demon at the same time, neither side will be able to tolerate you. Give it up now while you're still a demon. I don't want to give up, Su Zimo insisted stubbornly. Even if the entire world is your enemy? Even if the whole world is my enemy? In Su Zimo's heart, this cultivation technique was imparted to him by Dayu and had other important meanings. Even if the world stopped him, he would continue to cultivate it. Dayu was silent for a moment before replying. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness gets harder towards the end. You won't be able to master it without me by your side. Looking at Su Zimo's stubborn gaze, Dayu sighed softly and finally compromised. Dayu's eyes flashed with a demonic light. A few scriptures appeared in Su Zimo's mind. Dayu looked at Su Zimo and said gently, this is the scripture at the back. Remember it. If you can't cultivate it, don't waste your energy on it. Also, if that monkey in the Tsonglang mountain range is in trouble in the future, help him. Hearing this, Su Zimo's eyes flashed with understanding. Dayu had arranged for him to train in Tsonglang mountain range for another reason. Without the spirit monkey, Su Zimo would not have been able to master the Sanguine Ape 3 styles within a year. Without the spirit monkey, Su Zimo would not have activated the Sanguine Ape transformation. Although Dayu did not appear during that 1 year in Tsonglang mountain range, she had been watching Su Zimo. Otherwise, she would not have appeared at the last moment. After all, Dayu was concerned about him. Su Zimo looked at Dayu quietly. His gaze was scorching and unreasonable, as if he wanted to imprint Dayu's appearance deeply in his memory. If you want to cultivate both immortality and demonic, you will experience unimaginable hardships. But remember, these hardships will make you stronger. There is a saying in the Avatamsaka Sutra of Buddhism that I will give you. If you want to be a dragon or elephant, you must first be a horse or a cow. With that, Dayu turned around and waved at Su Zimo with her back facing him. Dayu took a step forward and arrived in midair. Under Su Zimo's gaze, her graceful figure disappeared, and she transformed into a blood-colored butterfly. There were 2 bright crescent moons imprinted on her wings. I have left you 3 things. The first is the spirit root in your body. As for the remaining 2 things, you might be able to use them in the future. Daiyu flapped her wings and the surrounding space collapsed and shattered instantly. Cracks appeared and one could vaguely see the dark and gloomy void. Chilly winds blew and it was heart palpitating. The butterfly flew into the darkness and gradually disappeared. Daiyu! Su Zimo ran a few steps and shouted in the direction that Daiyu left. I will look for you. The space gradually returned to normal and the cracks healed. At this moment, a voice came from the depths of the void. Sure, I will wait for you. Daiyu transformed into a butterfly and left. It was only until the moment that Daiyu left that Su Zimo realized that he had such a strong attachment and dependence on Daiyu in his heart. Su Zimo stood at the same spot, recalling the bits and pieces that happened here a year ago. For a moment he was in a daze. The morning sun rose and the sunlight broke through the fog. Unknowingly, Su Zimo stood under the peach blossom tree for an entire night, not moving at all. Finally, Su Zimo raised his head and looked into the distance. His eyes regained clarity and he hid the sorrow and reluctance in his heart. He took a deep breath and turned to leave. Su Zimo stopped in his tracks when he passed by the Su family's residence. Logically speaking, everyone in the Su family should be hiding in the Sky Treasure Pavilion in Songlang City. However, at this moment, the door of the Su family's residence was wide open, and there were faint voices coming from inside. Su Zimo was puzzled and walked in. Second young master? Second young master is back. When the people in the Su family saw Su Zimo, they hurried to greet him. Not long after, Su Hong led everyone out to welcome him. Zimo, are you all right? Su Hong went forward and grabbed Su Zimo's shoulders, sizing him up. I'm fine. Su Zimo shook his head and asked, why aren't all of you in the Sky Treasure Pavilion? Song Chi said, we were planning to leave Pingyang Town, but a lady in a red robe suddenly appeared and stopped us. As if recalling this scene again, Song Chi's eyes revealed deep shock. He said, this lady is so powerful. She can leave the ground and soar into the sky without any external help. She is at least a Jindan cultivator. She asked us to wait here and she will bring you back, second young master. Then she disappeared before our eyes. At this point, everyone in the Su family could not hide the shock in their eyes. Su Zimo lowered his head. No one noticed the loneliness and sadness in his eyes. Zimo, that lady is your master, right? Everyone in the Su family vaguely guessed that the mysterious lady was the reason why Su Zimo could transform from a weak scholar to a powerful cultivator who could kill chi refinement warriors. She is not my master. Su Zimo shook his head. Although Daiyu taught him demonic cultivation, Su Zimo had never treated Daiyu as his master. Where is this lady then? No matter what, the Su family has to thank her. We cannot neglect her, Su Hong asked again. She has left. Su Zimo said softly. Everyone was silent. Su Zimo composed himself and smiled. He asked, brother, what are your plans next? The Su family's situation was very special. They could not go to the country of Yen and the country of Qi could not accommodate them. They could only leave their hometown and settle down in other vassal states. I don't know either. Su Hong sighed softly. He looked in the direction of the country of Yen and murmured, I can't bear to leave after all. At this moment, a black armored cavalry galloped from afar. Before he even got close, he shouted, reporting to young master, the Yen kingdom's army is attacking. Dust is billowing everywhere. There are at least hundreds of thousands of people, and there are traces of cultivators among them. Chapter 53. The Army of the Country of Yen? Su Hong frowned and asked doubtfully. The country of Yen is leaderless. The most important thing should be to elect a new king to stabilize the morale of the army. Why would they lead an army to attack us? This doesn't make sense. Uncle Zheng shook his head too. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses are almost the entire military strength of the country of Yen. Why would they do this just for the Su family? Cultivators. There was a cold glint in Su Zimo's eyes. He thought to himself, it must be the Joyful clan. 10 days ago, the Joyful clan sent out hundreds of cultivators to kill Su Zimo. In the end, All of them died in Songlang mountain range. The joyful clan could not take this lying down. Moreover, be it the Su family or Su Zimo, they did not have much interaction with the cultivation world. The only enemy they had was the joyful clan. Big brother, bring the Su family members and retreat to Songlang city first. I will be there soon, Su Zimo said in a low voice. As soon as he finished his words, Su Zimo sensed something and looked into the distance. At the end of the horizon, there was a troop of more than 1,000 people galloping towards them. The scary thing was that this troop was made up of cultivators and they were flying on their swords in mid-air. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and saw clearly. These cultivators were extremely fast and had already reached the level of foundation establishment. A troop made up entirely of foundation establishment cultivators. Was the joyful clan so powerful? It's too late. Song Qi's expression was ugly as he shook his head. Su Hong clenched his fists and said coldly, I'll gather the black armored cavalry. We can't just wait for death. Wait a minute. Su Zimo stopped Su Hong and shook his head. Don't act rashly. Let's observe the situation first. Be it Su Hong or Song Qi, they had never fought with foundation establishment cultivators before. However, Su Zimo was very clear about the abilities of foundation establishment cultivators. If a troop made up of more than 1,000 foundation establishment cultivators were to attack with all their might, even 50,000 black armored cavalry would not be able to escape death, let alone 5,000. This was not Songlang mountain range. Su Zimo was not even a match for one foundation establishment cultivator, let alone a troop made up of more than 1,000 foundation establishment cultivators. All he could do now was wait. Not long after, more than 1,000 foundation establishment cultivators arrived in the sky above Pingyang town. They were dressed in the same uniform and their gazes were resolute. Their every movement exuded an iron-blooded killing intent. They did not seem like cultivators but more like an army. In front of the 1,000 or so foundation establishment cultivators, a luxurious carriage floated in the air. Although no one was carrying it, it floated steadily in the air. There was a sparkling and translucent bead curtain hanging in front of the carriage, and there seemed to be a person sitting inside. Under the cover of the bead curtain, the person's appearance could not be seen clearly. Everyone in the Su family was shocked. As a Qi refinement warrior, Song Qi had never seen such a grand scene before. He was dumbfounded. Something's wrong. Uncle Zheng whispered. The imprints on the clothes of these cultivators seemed to be the symbol of the Great Zhou dynasty. In midair, there was an exquisite 5-clawed golden dragon, imprinted on the sleeves of every foundation establishment cultivator. It was lifelike and exuded a suppressive aura. Right then, a foundation establishment cultivator who seemed to be the leader stood out. He wore a golden robe and stood in midair. His sharp gaze swept across everyone in the Su family and paused for a moment on Su Zimo. Thereafter, that person took out a piece of golden cloth from the storage bag at his waist and unfolded it slowly. When they saw the golden cloth, Su Hong and Uncle Zheng's expressions changed starkly as they exclaimed, "The Emperor's edict." Only the Great Zhou dynasty had the right to issue such a golden cloth. Furthermore, it came from the Emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty. Who was the Emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty? He was the supreme being of the Great Zhou dynasty. His achievements were unparalleled and his power was immense. When the emperor was enraged, millions of corpses could be laid to rest. Once the emperor's edict was issued, all the vassal states in the Great Zhou dynasty could only obey unconditionally. Otherwise, they would be judged as disobeying the emperor and be punished by the Great Zhou dynasty. The king of Yan is tyrannical and has harmed loyal people, causing chaos in the imperial court. He should be abolished. It is said that Su Hong is the son of Su Mu of Yan country, and has the support of the people. He is talented and bold and loves the people like his own children. He can be conferred as the new king. I hereby issue this edict and announce it to the world for you to know. The golden armored leader in midair closed the edict in his hands slowly and looked at Su Hong. Su Hong, accept the edict. Su Hong stood rooted to the ground with a shocked expression and disbelief in his eyes. The Great Zhou dynasty rarely interfered in the affairs of the vassal states. It was even more unprecedented for the emperor to issue an emperor's edict to confer the title of king. It was not that Su Hong did not want to be king. The reason why he rejected Wei Mingqing's suggestion previously was because he was worried that if he were to be king, war would inevitably break out and the innocent citizens of Yan country would be implicated. But now, with the emperor's edict in hand, Su Hong could confer the title of King of Yan without shedding a drop of blood, and war would definitely not break out in Yan country. If anyone were to protest, they would not be challenging Su Hong, but the emperor's edict. Nobody would do something like that. It was no different from courting death. More importantly, the Su family would not have to leave their homes and wander around the various countries. The black armored cavalry would also finally have a place to stay. Young master, hurry and accept the edict. Uncle Zheng was agitated and could not hide his joy as he urged softly. But Su Hong looked troubled. He did not have any interactions with the great Zhou dynasty, and this emperor's edict was even more sudden. He was truly uneasy. Instinctively, Su Hong looked at Su Zimo. Su Zimo frowned secretly and shook his head. He had not seen anyone from the great Zhou dynasty either. The greatest possibility was Dai Yu. Before Dai Yu left, she told Su Zimo that she left him 3 things. One of them was a spirit root, but she did not mention the other 2. Could his brother be conferring the title of king because of the second item? However, that did not make sense. Su Zimo could not figure it out and said softly, "Brother, accept the edict first." Su Hong nodded and took a deep breath. He took a deep bow and knelt on one knee, saying in a deep voice, "Su Hong accepts the edict." The golden armored commander waved his hands and the emperor's edict landed lightly in Su Hong's hands. It emitted a dazzling golden light and was majestic, as though the emperor had arrived personally. Right then, dust billowed and the sound of hooves thundered not far away. The army of the country of Yan had just arrived, and the leaders were all famous generals of the country of Yan. Among them was the general of Jianan City, Wei Mingqing. There were hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses. They were densely packed and one could not see the end of them. The generals in the front row got off their horses and knelt on one knee in the direction of Su Hong, shouting loudly, "Greetings, King! Greetings, King!" The hundreds of thousands of soldiers shouted at the same time. Their voices were deafening and reverberated endlessly. At this moment, the Su family finally understood that the hundreds of thousands of soldiers were not here for revenge. They were here to meet the new king of the country of Yan and bring Su Hong back to guard the capital. Although this was great news, the Su family was still confused. It was as though they were in a dream and it was not real. Su Zimo lifted his head and looked at the carriage that was floating in midair. He could not take his eyes off it, as though he wanted to see through the carriage. Swoosh! An arm as white as a lotus root stretched out and lifted the bead curtain. A beautiful woman walked out of the carriage. She was wearing a light yellow dress that trailed on the ground. There was a ribbon tied around her waist that perfectly accentuated her exquisite figure. The lady's skin was whiter than snow and she was elegant and beautiful. The moment she walked out, the elegant carriage behind her suddenly seemed to lose its splendor. "Zimo, I have said that we will definitely meet." The lady waved at Su Zimo and smiled. Chapter 54. Upon hearing this, everyone's expression became extremely interesting. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless gazes landed on Su Zimo. Everyone in the Su residence was naturally dumbfounded. Everyone could tell that the lady before them was of noble status and had a great background. It was highly possible that she was a member of the royal family of the Great Zhou dynasty. What made everyone in the Su residence even more surprised was that from the tone of this lady, she seemed to be very close to their second young master. Many foundation establishment cultivators behind the lady were also looking at Su Zimo. Their eyes revealed a hint of jealousy and envy. The golden armored commander's gaze was even more direct with a hint of provocation. Yao Shui rode on her flying sword and landed on the ground. She looked at the stunned Su Zimo and pursed her lips, smiling. "Why? Don't you recognize me?" "You?" Su Zimo recovered from his shock and smiled as well. He asked, "Aren't you a disciple of Azure Frost sect?" "Yes." Yao Shui nodded. She paused for a while and continued, "However, I am also a princess of the Great Zhou dynasty. My surname is Ji. I met you by chance that day and I hid something from you. You won't blame me, right?" Su Zimo smiled and shook his head. The surname Ji was not common. If Ji Yaoshua had said this surname that day, Su Zimo would most likely have guessed her background. However, now that he thought about it, there were some clues that could be found. Ji Yaoshua was very clear about the background of Sky Treasure Pavilion. Moreover, she casually gave Su Zimo a Sky Treasure gold badge. Such generosity was not something that an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator could do. "Old friend, aren't you going to treat me to a cup of tea?" Ji Yaoshua tilted her head and blinked as she asked. "All right, let's go to my place." Su Zimo nodded at Su Hong, indicating for him not to worry. He then brought Ji Yaoshua to his residence. The golden armored commander brought a few foundation establishment cultivators and followed closely behind. They seemed to be worried that the two of them would be alone. In the courtyard, Su Zimo and Yao Shui sat at a round table. There were 2 cups of fragrant tea on the table. The golden armored commander and the rest were standing behind Yao Shui. The golden armored commander looked at Su Zimo with obvious hostility. Su Zimo had long noticed this, but he didn't care. "Yaoshua, how dare you?" Su Zimo was full of doubts. Just as he opened his mouth to ask, he was interrupted by a shout from the golden armored commander. "The princess's name is not for a mortal like you to say." The golden armored commander sneered and looked at Su Zimo with eyes full of contempt. "Daisu." Before Su Zimo could say anything, Ji Yaoshua raised her brows and said in a deep voice, "What Zimo calls me has nothing to do with you. This has nothing to do with you. Go out and wait." "Third princess, the king has ordered me to ensure your safety. I cannot leave." Daisu bowed slightly and cupped his fists. "Then shut up." Ji Yaoshua glared at Daisu and gave him a warning. "Yes, your highness." Daisu's expression was ugly. He glared fiercely at Su Zimo and agreed. Su Zimo's expression was calm. He ignored Daisu's provocation and didn't even look at him. Ji Yaoshua smiled apologetically at Su Zimo and said, "A few days ago, a secret order from Sky Treasure Pavilion was sent to the dynasty. I happened to see it then. From the description in the secret order, I guess that you were the one who killed the king of Yen. Hence, I begged my father to write an imperial edict and brought people over." Although Ji Yaoshua didn't mention some things, Su Zimo could guess. Before this, the background of the Su family had probably been thoroughly investigated. "Zimo, are you satisfied with this arrangement?" Ji Yaoshua asked with a smile. "Pretty good." Su Zimo nodded. With this imperial edict, not only would Su Hong be conferred the title of king without shedding any blood, the surrounding vassal states would also not dare to invade the borders of the Great Yen. This favor could not be said to be small. However, there were some things that Su Zimo wouldn't talk about. Instead, he would remember them in his heart. "Why did you bring so many foundation establishment cultivators over?" Su Zimo asked again. Ji Yaoshua frowned slightly and said, "After I returned to the sect, I investigated the Joyful Clan. I found out that the cultivators of the Joyful Clan were evil. They often raped women and used their yin to supplement their yang to increase their cultivation. Hence, I wanted to bring people to eradicate this clan. But..." Ji Yaoshua paused for a moment. There was a flash of confusion in her eyes. "But what?" Su Zimo vaguely guessed the reason and asked without batting an eyelid. Ji Yaoshua continued, "But I found out that more than 100 Joyful Clan cultivators had died in Songlang Mountain Range. Moreover, there were obvious traces of a fight. It's as if they were chasing after someone but got killed instead." At this point, Ji Yaoshua suddenly raised her head and looked at Su Zimo. Back then, the Joyful Clan cultivators had caused quite a commotion when they were chasing after Su Zimo. Many people in the capital of the country of Yen had seen it. "Oh." Su Zimo was slightly surprised. His expression was just right. Ji Yaoshua thought to herself, although Zimo is quite capable and his close combat skills are strong, he definitely does not have the ability to kill a foundation establishment cultivator. It should not be him. It should be someone else. After pondering for a while, Ji Yaoshua's eyes flashed with palpitations. She continued, "The scariest thing is that when we rushed to the location of the Joyful Clan, we found that the entire clan had been reduced to ruins. Corpses and bones were everywhere. No one was left alive." Ah! This time Su Zimo was shocked. Although Su Zimo had killed more than 100 Joyful Clan cultivators, this clan was still around. If there was a chance, the Joyful Clan would definitely come for revenge. 10 days had passed and there was still no news from the joyful clan. Su Zimo still felt uneasy. He did not expect that this clan had already vanished into thin air. The strength of the person who attacked far exceeded that of the joyful clan cultivators. It seemed that in just a moment, all the cultivators of this clan were dead. This person and the person in Songlang mountain range are definitely not the same person, Ji Yaoshua said. A figure in a blood-red robe flashed across Su Zimo's mind. It was a cold and beautiful face. According to what Ji Yaoshua said, Su Zimo could not think of a second person who had such capabilities and would do such a thing. Before Dai Yu left, she must have been worried that the joyful clan would take revenge on him. That was why she took drastic measures and wiped out a clan directly to remove his worries. However, Su Zimo would definitely not say this out loud. Ji Yaoshua heaved a long sigh. She smiled and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. Apart from appointing a new king for the country of Yan, I actually have another matter to look for you." "What is it?" Su Zimo asked. Ji Yaoshua took out a fist-sized stone from her storage bag and placed it on the round table. She smiled and asked, "Zimo, guess what this is?" "Spirit stone?" It did not seem like it. Su Zimo shook his head. "This is a spirit testing stone. It can test whether a person has a spirit root or not. It can also test the grade of the spirit root." Ji Yaoshua explained, "Zimo, with your capabilities, if you have a spirit root, even if it is the most ordinary one, your future achievements will not be too low. Moreover, the clan has already promised me that I can bring someone with a spirit root into the clan. Even if it is the most ordinary pseudo-spirit root, it is fine. Zimo, quickly try it." Chapter 55. Su Zimo looked at the spirit testing stone on the round table and did not extend his hand. Instead, he seemed to be deep in thought. Before Dai Yu left, she had already planted a spirit root in him that was not weaker than a heaven spirit root. Su Zimo did not doubt that at all. However, upon hearing Ji Yaoshua's last sentence, another thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Seeing that Su Zimo did not extend his hand, Ji Yaoshua thought that he did not understand her sect and explained, "In the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty, there are 5 sects that are the strongest. Azure Frost sect is one of them. Zimo, you can rest assured." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he suddenly asked, "What are the other 4 sects?" "The 5 sects are Iridescent Clouds Palace, Southern Mountains sect, True Fire sect, Azure Frost sect and Misty Peak." Su Zimo lowered his head and gently blew at the tea leaves floating on the tea. Upon hearing the words Iridescent Clouds Palace, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Su Zimo raised his head with a normal expression and asked, "To join the 5 sects, the requirements for spirit roots are not low, right?" "Yes." Ji Yaoshua nodded. "To join the 5 sects, the worst spirit root must be a superior class spirit root. Pseudo or ordinary spirit roots will not do. However, Zimo, don't worry. Even if you have a pseudo spirit root, I can still bring you into the sect." Spirit roots were divided into 5 grades: pseudo spirit root, ordinary spirit root, superior class spirit root, earth spirit root, and the rarest heaven spirit root. In other words, for Zhou Dingyun and Shan Mengqi to be chosen by perfected Songlang of Iridescent Clouds Palace, they must have at least a superior class spirit root or even better. Su Zimo smiled and sipped his tea. He asked casually, "Are there any grudges between the 5 sects? Or rather, which of the 5 sects is stronger?" "Grudges?" Ji Yaoshua shook her head. "I'm not sure about that. However, Iridescent Clouds Palace and True Fire sect are very close and have always had a good relationship. The strength of the 5 great sects is about the same, each with their own strengths. Among them, Misty Peak is the most mysterious. In the Darzhou dynasty, a sect competition is held every 10 years, and all the sects within the territory of the dynasty can participate. No matter if it's in battle, alchemy, equipment refinement, or talisman crafting, the members of the 5 great sects practically occupy the top 10 positions." Su Zimo narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. Since True Fire sect and Iridescent Clouds Palace were close, Su Zimo would definitely not choose either of them. As for joining Azure Frost sect, Su Zimo wanted to give this opportunity to Su Hong and Su Xiaoning. He wanted to see who would have this opportunity. Only the Southern Mountains sect and Misty Peak were left for Su Zimo to choose from. Su Zimo asked again, Among the 5 biggest sects, which one is the closest to the Yin Kingdom? Ji Yaoshua took out a map made of beast skin from her storage bag. After taking a closer look, she said, "The closest one is Misty Peak." Su Zimo nodded and did not say anything else. "Zimo, why are you asking about this? Hurry and test your spirit root," Ji Yaoshua urged again. Su Zimo chuckled. "A cultivator has already checked for me. He said that I don't have a spirit root, so I can't test it." Ji Yaoshua could not hide the disappointment in her eyes. She seemed indignant as she persuaded again. Perhaps that person saw wrongly. "Test it again." Su Zimo said in a low voice, "Yaoshua, this is a rare opportunity. I have 2 relatives and I want them to try to see if they have a chance to join Azure Frost sect." "This sounds good." Ji Yaoshua hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Su Zimo stood up and thanked her. After a while, he brought Su Hong and Su Xiaoning over. He briefly explained the origin of the spirit testing stone and asked them to test it. Su Hong waved his hand and shook his head. "I don't need to test it. Even if I have a spirit root, I can't cultivate. Among the 3 of us, one of us has to inherit our father's ambition. Xiaoning, go and test it." Su Xiaoning looked hesitant, as if she was afraid. She looked at Su Zimo pleadingly. Su Zimo smiled. He held his sister's hand and led her to the round table. He said gently, "Don't be afraid. Just hold this stone." Su Xiaoning nodded her head solemnly. She seemed to have made up her mind and went forward to hold the spirit testing stone. The moment Su Xiaoning held the spirit testing stone, 5 different colors of light flashed on the spirit testing stone. Su Xiaoning had never seen such a scene before. She was shocked and instinctively threw the spirit testing stone away. The 5 lights represented the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire and earth. They were the worst spirit roots, pseudo-spirit roots. Su Zimo was elated. No matter what, this meant that Su Xiaoning had a spirit root and could join one of the 5 major clans, Azure Frost sect. In fact, even without Ji Yaoshua, Su Zimo could also join Azure Frost sect with the spirit root planted by Dai Yu. However, Su Zimo vaguely sensed something and wanted to keep a distance from Ji Yaoshua. Who was Ji Yaoshua? She was the 3rd princess of the Great Zhou dynasty. Su Zimo knew his place. Now that they met, he had already attracted the hostility of Ji Yaoshua's guard. If he got too close, he might get into trouble. It was not that he was afraid. It was just that he was not strong enough to protect himself. However, Su Xiaoning was different. After all, she was a girl and would not attract the hostility of others. Indeed, at the sight of this, a glint of joy flashed across Dai Su's eyes. He heaved a sigh of relief and seemed to let down his guard. Su Zimo looked at Ji Yaoshua with a solemn expression and said in a deep voice, "Since that's the case, bring Xiaoning and leave. Xiaoning is timid and has never traveled far. In the future, please take care of her when she cultivates in Azure Frost sect." "Don't worry, I'll take good care of her," Ji Yaoshua said. "Brother, I don't want to leave you or the Su family." Su Xiaoning pouted and tears welled up in her eyes. She was about to cry. Su Hong laughed. "Child cultivation is great. It's a rare opportunity. Don't miss it. Besides, when you become powerful, I'll have to ask you for help in the future." Hearing Su Hong's witty words, Su Xiaoning smiled through her tears and nodded seriously. "Yes, Xiaoning will work hard in cultivation and come back to help me in the future. Let's go. Pack your things and say goodbye to your Uncle Zheng and the rest." Su Hong left with Su Xiaoning. Looking at the back view of the 2 of them, Su Zimo smiled. "Zimo," Ji Yaoshua wanted to say something but stopped. Su Zimo smiled and stood up. He bowed and said, "Thank you for your help this time. You've given the Su family a place to stay, and given Xiaoning a chance to join Azure Frost sect. If you have any requests in the future, I Su Zimo will definitely agree." Dai Su sneered and pouted. "You're boasting shamelessly. You're the 3rd princess of the Great Zhou dynasty. Why would she need your help?" Su Zimo smiled faintly and did not rebut. At this moment, no one realized how much weight Su Zimo's promise would carry in the future. Chapter 56. The next morning. On the long street of Pingyang town, the Su family was on one side and the foundation establishment cultivators were on the other. In the middle of the long street, a man and a woman stood opposite each other. The man was dressed in a green robe, clean and simple. He had delicate features. The woman was dressed in a pale yellow long dress. Her black hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Her face was flawless and her eyes were like water, carrying a hint of melancholy. Zimo, are you really not leaving with me? Even if you can't join Azure Frost sect, given your capabilities, you will have a bright future in the Great Zhou dynasty, Ji Yaoshua asked softly. No. Suzy smiled. I am used to being carefree. I can't abide by the rules of the dynasty. Zimo, do you intend to go to Misty Peak? Ji Yaoshua was extremely intelligent. She could vaguely sense that Su Zimo seemed to be deliberately distancing himself from her. Oh. Su Zimo's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, but he did not reply. Ji Yaoshua said, it is much more difficult to join Misty Peak as compared to the other 4 major sections. The spirit root test is only one of the obstacles. There are other hurdles after that. I heard that many advanced Qi refinement warriors can't join Misty Peak. Seeing Ji Yaoshua's concerned gaze, Su Zimo sighed in his heart. He could naturally tell that Ji Yaoshua was genuinely good to him. Perhaps she wanted to repay his kindness or for other reasons. But no matter what, he could not leave with Ji Yaoshua. Although Dai Su hid it well, he could not hide it from Su Zimo's spirit perception. This person had the intention to kill him. It would be fine if this intention came from Dai Su himself. But if it was the intention of the emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty, it would be devastating to Su Zimo and the Su family. The emperor's edict seemed to be a reward on the surface, but it was also a warning behind it. The emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty could make Su Hong a king. Naturally, he could also make the Su family disappear easily. Heaven's might was vast and mighty, and heaven's will was hard to fathom. Dai seemed to have mercilessly thrown Su Zimo into Conglang mountain range because she wanted to tell him that whether it was the secular world or the cultivation world, it was no different from Conglang mountain range. The law of survival was the law of the jungle. Only if you can survive in Conglang mountain range will you have the qualifications to roam the cultivation world. If one wasn't strong enough, they could only be passive in all aspects and be at the mercy of others without being able to do anything. What plans does Zimo have for the future? Ji Yaoshua asked again. Su Zimo said, reading 10,000 books is not as good as traveling 10,000 li. I might go out for a walk. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo bowed slightly to Ji Yaoshua and cupped his fists. Miss Ji, farewell. Please take care of yourself. Hearing the words Miss Ji, Ji Yaoshua's eyes darkened. After a moment of silence, she nodded and said, young Master Su, take care of yourself too. Ji Yaoshua boarded the carriage and the bead curtains fell. It was as if the two of them were separated from each other's world, and it was difficult for them to meet again. Su Xiaoning sat in the carriage and looked outside with tears streaming down her face. Ji Yaoshua sighed softly and hugged Su Xiaoning in her arms, saying softly, let's go. The carriage soared into the air and more than 1,000 Foundation establishment cultivators rode on their swords to protect the carriage. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the sky above Pingyang town. At the back of the group, a Foundation establishment cultivator came to Dai Su's side and whispered, Commander Dai, do we still want to kill that Su Zimo? There's no need. At least he knows what's good for him and did not go overboard, Dai Su sneered. Dai Su sneered, he's just a mortal. A frog at the bottom of a well. Let him fend for himself. In the carriage, Su Xiaoning seemed to be overwhelmed with grief. She fell into Ji Yaoshua's arms and closed her eyes in a deep sleep. The tears at the corners of her eyes had yet to dry. Ji Yaoshua stared at the bead curtains in front of her in a daze. Her eyes were dim and there was a hint of sorrow in her brows that made one's heart ache. Princess, don't be sad over that person. It's not worth it, Dai Su said softly outside the carriage. Ji Yaoshua seemed to have not heard him. Dai Su continued, Princess, one of you is a phoenix in the sky and the other is an ant on the ground. He's not worthy of you. Ji Yaoshua frowned and looked at Su Xiaoning, who was still sleeping in her arms. She then turned and said softly, if he's an ant on the ground, what are you? You don't have to care about my matters. You're not qualified. Ji Yaoshua's tone was stern, but she lowered her voice, afraid that she would wake Su Xiaoning up. Princess, don't blame me for being nosy. You'll definitely become a Jean Dan in the future. and have a lifespan of 500 years. He's just a mortal with a lifespan of less than 100 years. It's not realistic to choose him as your Dao partner, Dai Su said again. Ji Yaoshua's face darkened and she suddenly asked, "Did father say anything to you?" No. Dai Su was stunned for a moment and immediately denied it. Ji Yaoshua secretly clenched her fists and said coldly, "Dai Su, I'm warning you. Don't touch Su Zimo and don't touch anyone from the Su family." Dai Su's face was cold and he did not say anything. After a while, Ji Yaoshua sighed softly and said sadly, 100 years will pass in the blink of an eye. I'm afraid I won't have the chance to meet him again. Hearing this, Dai Su heaved a sigh of relief and finally felt relieved. At this moment, Ji Yaoshua had already realized that if she were to get too close to Su Zimo, what she would bring to Su Zimo was not a chance encounter but destruction. Ji Yaoshua was dejected and did not notice that Su Xiaoning, who was lying in her arms, had her eyelashes fluttered but she did not open her eyes. Pingyang Town. Su Hong and the rest were also returning to the capital with the country of Yan's army. "Zimo, why don't you follow me to the capital and stay for a while?" Su Hong was going to the capital, and would not return to Pingyang Town for a while. He was worried about leaving Su Zimo alone. "Brother, go ahead. I'll stay in Pingyang Town for a while and then go out to explore." "Don't worry about me," Su Zimo said. Su Hong frowned. The Su family's residence is empty and there's no one familiar in Pingyang Town. "You're alone, I'm not alone." Su Zimo smiled. Su Hong was shocked. Su Zimo did not explain. He thumped Su Hong's chest and smiled. "Go to the capital. Don't worry about me. If there's a chance, I'll go to the capital to visit you." "All right, we'll go then." Su Hong got on his horse and nodded at Su Zimo. He led the rest of the Su family and left under the protection of the country of Yan's army. The cold wind was blowing. In the snow, Su Zimo walked on the empty long street. His back view looked a little lonely. Xiaoning had left. Su Hong had left. It seemed that everyone had left him within a day. Su Zimo arrived at his own residence. When he pushed open the door, the snow seemed to have stopped and a faint warmth hit him. There seemed to be a woman in a blood-red robe standing under the peach tree. She looked both real and illusory. She looked back and smiled. Su Zimo was not alone. He did not feel lonely. When he returned here, it was as if Dai Yu was by his side. She watched him cultivate as she did in the past. She would kick and hit him from time to time. Su Zimo smiled and closed the door. Su Zimo did not intend to leave Pingyang Town immediately. He was waiting for someone. Just like that night 1.5 years ago. Chapter 57. Winter passed and spring came. 2 years ago, perfected Songlang passed by Pingyang Town unintentionally and took away 2 people. However, he changed the fate of many people directly or indirectly. Zhou Dingyun was one of them. During the 2 years of cultivation in Iridescent Cloud's palace, Zhou Dingyun often thought that if it was not for perfected Songlang, he would still be in the prison of Pingyang Town. He would be chewing on a cold bun, drinking cold water and thinking of ways to please the prison guards. But now Zhou Dingyun was a Qi refinement warrior and a disciple of Iridescent Cloud's palace. Although he was only an outer sect disciple, every time Zhou Dingyun stepped into the mortal world, he could feel the awe and envy of the mortals around him. He could control the life and death of every mortal. Although he was only an outer sect disciple, he was still wearing the Tao robe of Iridescent Cloud's palace. When some cultivators from small sects saw him, even if their cultivation level was higher than his, they would show him respect. Zhou Dingyun enjoyed this feeling very much. However, this was not enough. Every time Zhou Dingyun enjoyed the glory of being a Qi refinement warrior, an image would flash across his mind uncontrollably. That night there was no moon. He knelt in front of a green-robed scholar, begging him bitterly with tears and snot streaming down his face. This scene was like a thorn stuck deep in Zhou Dingyun's throat. For the past 2 years he felt increasingly uncomfortable and unbearable. The higher Zhou Dingyun's cultivation level was, the more he could not forget this scene. No matter what achievements he had, it would be difficult to erase the humiliation that the scholar brought him that night. After cultivating, Zhou Dingyun was very clear that if he could not remove this thorn, It would definitely become his mental demon in the future. The way to remove this thorn was very simple. He would return to Pingyang town, kill that scholar and annihilate his family. Now the time was ripe. Zhou Dingyun had an earth spirit root and had cultivated to level 8 qi condensation within 2 years. This speed was definitely one of the fastest among his peers. Of course, Shun Mengqi, who joined the sect at the same time as him, had a heaven spirit root. She had cultivated to perfected qi condensation and was only one step away from breaking through to the foundation establishment realm. Of course, I can't compare to senior sister Shun, but level 8 qi condensation is enough. Haha, I'm afraid there is no qi refinement warrior in the entire Pingyang town. Pingyang town was just in front of him. Zhou Dingyun's blood was instantly boiling and he could not help but laugh. In the eyes of ordinary people, there was nothing more prideful than returning home in glory. But now Zhou Dingyun had returned as a qi refinement warrior. This was much better than returning home in glory. Not only did Zhou Dingyun want to annihilate the Su family, make Su Zimo kneel in front of him and torture him mercilessly, he also wanted to smash the prison in Pingyang town into smithereens and kill all the prison guards who had once humiliated him. By the way, Su Zimo's sister is quite pretty. We can't kill her. Haha, Zhou Dingyun said with a lewd smile. It was late at night when Zhou Dingyun arrived at Pingyang town. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. It was no different from the night 2 years ago. The long street was empty. There was no one around. Zhou Dingyun rode on his flying sword and arrived outside Su Zimo's residence. Looking at the familiar mansion, Zhou Dingyun was filled with emotions. 2 years ago, when he came to assassinate Su Zimo, he had to climb over the wall carefully. But now he could walk in openly. To be more precise, he flew in. He wondered what kind of expression Su Zimo would have when he saw him riding on his flying sword. Would he be scared silly? Would he immediately kneel down and kowtow to beg for mercy? Zhou Dingyun was looking forward to it. Zhou Dingyun came to the courtyard and looked around. This place was no different from 2 years ago. It was early spring and the peach tree in the courtyard had not changed. The peach blossoms were in full bloom and were falling. The only difference was that on the stone table under the peach tree, there was a big blood-colored bow and a long saber. Creak. The door of one of the houses in the courtyard suddenly opened. A scholar in green robes walked out. The scholar in green robes was holding a jar of wine in his hands. He looked calm as he came to the stone table in the courtyard. He sat down casually and poured 2 bowls of wine. He then looked at Zhou Dingyun, who was in midair, and said calmly, "Come down. I'll treat you to a drink." Zhou Dingyun was stunned. He had imagined the scene of the two of them meeting countless times. But the scene in front of him was not one of them. No surprise. No fear. No begging for mercy. Nothing at all. The scholar in green robe's calmness made Zhou Dingyun's murderous intent even stronger. "What are you pretending for?" Zhou Dingyun sneered secretly. He had already checked Su Zimo. There was no fluctuation of spirit energy in the latter's body. This meant that 2 years had passed and Su Zimo was still an ordinary person. Zhou Dingyun was fearless. He slowly landed in the courtyard and came to the stone table. He squinted at Su Zimo and suddenly asked, "You seem to have expected that I would come back?" "Yes." Su Zimo nodded. 2 years ago, when I let you go, I knew that you would come back. Haha, you scholars are so smart. Zhou Dingyun laughed loudly. There was a flash of mockery in his eyes and he changed the topic. "However, this little cleverness seems a little childish in front of me." Zhou Dingyun had been observing Su Zimo. He wanted to see something from his face. But Zhou Dingyun was disappointed. Su Zimo just looked at him calmly. His eyes were clear and there was no fluctuation in them. Zhou Dingyun laughed dryly. "Fate is so wonderful. Who would have thought that the ruffian from Pingyang town 2 years ago would become a qi refinement warrior now? The change is too great." "Oh right, do you know what a qi refinement warrior is?" Zhou Dingyun looked at Su Zimo provocatively. Su Zimo sighed softly. He seemed to be a little emotional. He nodded and said, "Yes, the change is too great. Do you know why I chose to come back at this time?" Zhou Dingyun raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why? 2 years ago it was here in this season on such a night. It was the same two of us," but Zhou Dingyun no longer concealed the murderous intent in his eyes. He said coldly, The ending tonight is completely different from 2 years ago. Su Zimo smiled and suddenly pushed the wine bowl in front of Zhou Dingyun. He nodded and said, "Drink." "Oh." Zhou Dingyun immediately became alert. He did not understand why Su Zimo was so calm and collected. Looking at the bowl of wine in front of him, a thought flashed across Zhou Dingyun's mind. He could not help but sneer. "Second young master Su, there must be something special in this wine? So this is what you are relying on. Haha, it is a pity that I saw through it at one glance." Zhou Dingyun thought that Su Zimo had poisoned the wine. That was why he could not wait for him to drink this bowl of wine. There is nothing special in the wine, but there is something special in this bowl of wine. Su Zimo shook his head. "What is it?" Zhou Dingyun asked instinctively. "This is called wine for the road." Su Zimo lifted his head and looked at Zhou Dingyun. He said calmly, "Drink this bowl of wine and I will send you on your way." Upon hearing this, Zhou Dingyun instantly felt a chill down his spine. When Su Zimo looked at him, it was as if he had returned to that night 2 years ago. Chapter 58. Zhou Dingyun seemed to be in great shock. He stood up abruptly and took a few steps back. His palm touched the storage bag at his waist. He squinted his eyes and looked solemn. Calm down, calm down." Zhou Dingyun comforted him in his heart. "I am a level 8 Qi refinement warrior. Compared to 2 years ago, I have been reborn. How can I be frightened by a scholar? Su Zimo is just a mortal. What can he rely on?" "Are you not drinking?" Su Zimo smiled and shook his head. "If I don't drink, I won't have the chance anymore." "Pretentious!" Zhou Dingyun shouted. He slapped his storage bag and took out a flying sword. A beam of spirit qi shot out from his fingertip and the flying sword shone brightly. It was an inferior-grade spirit weapon. "Quick!" Zhou Dingyun calmed himself down with the flying sword in his hand. He pointed forward and the flying sword turned into a beam of light. It pierced towards Su Zimo instantly. Su Zimo did not move at all. He was like an old monk who was meditating. The flying sword stopped at Su Zimo's glabella. It would have pierced into his glabella if it had been another inch. However, Su Zimo's expression was normal. He did not even bat an eyelid from the beginning to the end. Zhou Dingyun thought that Su Zimo had been scared silly. He could not help but laugh sinisterly. "Su Zimo, if you kneel down and beg me now, I can still consider letting you live. I think you are mistaken about something." Su Zimo stretched out his palm and held the flying sword in front of him gently. He said calmly, "Here in this season on such a night, it will still be the two of us. However, the outcome will not be much different." Seeing that Su Zimo actually used his palm to hold the sharp inferior-grade spirit weapon, Zhou Dingyun could not help but reveal a trace of cruelty in his eyes. He was really ignorant. Su Zimo said again, "If there is a change, it would be 2 years ago when I let you go. But now you can't leave. Damn it, you are still spouting nonsense. I will cripple one of your palms first." Zhou Dingyun cursed loudly. A ruthless look flashed across his eyes. He controlled the flying sword and twisted it forcefully. At the same time, Su Zimo's palm curled and shook. "Pa!" A crisp sound rang out like a sudden clap of thunder. Zhou Dingyun was shocked. There was no blood and flesh flying everywhere as he had imagined. On the other hand, Su Zimo's palm was unharmed. What surprised Zhou Dingyun even more was that he had lost control of the flying sword. How could this be? The next moment, Zhou Dingyun saw another scene. The surprise in his eyes turned into horror. Su Zimo slowly opened his palm. The flying sword lay quietly in his palm, covered with cracks. Su Zimo loosened his grip, and this low-grade spirit artifact actually turned into a pile of fragments, scattering on the ground. A low-grade spirit artifact was wasted just like that. Looking at Su Zimo's eyes that were gradually turning cold, Zhou Dingyun's heart sank to the bottom. He finally realized that 2 years had passed. He had become a level 8 Qi refinement warrior, and this second young master Su in front of him was no longer the weak scholar he used to be. He finally realized that Su Zimo was not referring to him when he exclaimed that the changes were too great, but Su Zimo himself. He finally realized that the bowl of wine on the round table might really be his last wine. For a moment, Zhou Dingyun still could not understand how Su Zimo could shatter his low-grade spirit artifact with just his flesh and blood. Zhou Dingyun also did not want to delve into the reason behind this. Now, he only wanted to leave this place and get as far away from Su Zimo as possible. Zhou Dingyun took out another flying sword from his storage bag. This was only a pseudo-spirit artifact. In the iridescent cloud's palace, it was already a great gift for an outer sect disciple to obtain an inferior-grade spirit artifact. Just now, it had been crippled by Su Zimo's bare hands. Zhou Dingyun stepped on the flying sword, soared into the air and flew outside. Before leaving, Zhou Dingyun could not help but turn back to take a look. He saw that Su Zimo was not in a hurry to get up. Instead, he drank the bowl of strong wine on the stone table unhurriedly. He then stood up and tied the long saber on the table to his waist. He carried the quiver of arrows on his back and lifted the blood-colored bow in his hands. Zhou Dingyun swallowed his saliva and turned around. He activated the flying sword with all his might and sped away into the distance. The wind whistled in his ears. As the wind blew, Zhou Dingyun could not help but shiver. Unknowingly, he had already broken out in cold sweat. Not long after, Zhou Dingyun was already far away from Pingyang town. Songlang mountain range was not far ahead. It was pitch black and there were faint roars of spirit beasts. Zhou Dingyun heaved a long sigh of relief. He finally felt at ease. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from behind Zhou Dingyun. Do you still remember that night 2 years ago when you knelt down and begged for mercy and the oath you made? Upon hearing this, Zhou Dingyun was scared out of his wits. He almost lost control of the flying sword, lost his balance and fell from midair. Su Zimo. This voice belonged to Su Zimo. How could it be? How did he catch up with him? Zhou Dingyun's face was pale and he broke out in cold sweat. As he activated the flying sword and sped forward desperately, he turned back to look. Su Zimo was following behind him. His expression was calm and he seemed to be walking casually. However, every step he took covered a distance of 20 to 30 feet. He did not use all his strength at all. At the thought of this, Zhou Dingyun felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He felt chills all over his body. Su Zimo's voice sounded again. That night 2 years ago, you swore to the heavens that if you were lucky enough to join an immortal sect in the future, you would not seek revenge on me. Otherwise, you would die from arrows piercing through your heart. If that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish. Upon hearing this, Zhou Dingyun finally understood the purpose of the blood-colored longbow on the stone table. Don't! Zhou Dingyun hurriedly turned around. He had just said one word when his vision was shrouded by a black shadow. Woo woo woo. More than 10 sharp arrows arrived in an instant. Poof! Zhou Dingyun felt a pain in his chest. It was as if he had lost something in his body. He felt weak all over and fell from the sky. With a thud, Zhou Dingyun fell to the ground. His body was covered in mud, and his lower body was dyed red with blood. Zhou Dingyun tried his best to lower his head and look at his chest. His flesh was badly mutilated, and there was a bloody hole the size of a bowl. His heart had been pierced through by more than 10 sharp arrows. Arrows piercing through the heart. Everything seemed to be predestined. A gentle breeze blew past and the corner of a green robe fluttered in front of Zhou Dingyun's eyes. Zhou Dingyun laid on the ground and lifted his head to look at Su Zimo, who was standing in front of him. A strange smile appeared on his face as he said in a muffled voice, I'm from the iridescent clouds. Palace. You can't escape even if you kill me. One day, the Songlang will really find you. Su Zimo squatted down and smiled. There's no need to wait for that day. I'll find him. You leave first. The next one will be perfected Songlang. Upon hearing this, Zhou Dingyun's head tilted to the side and he stopped breathing. Su Zimo pulled the storage bag from Zhou Dingyun's waist and kept it in his arms. After that, he grabbed Zhou Dingyun's corpse and threw it into the Songlang mountain range. There was no need to wait for the next day. Zhou Dingyun's corpse would be devoured by the spirit beasts. He destroyed the corpse and destroyed all traces. No one would know what happened that night.